Today we're diving into Kitsap County's Natural Resources Asset Management Program, or KNRAMP, and we'll share a bit about the program's journey, what it looks like now, how it's evolved, and what we've learned along the way. And if you already attended the Adjourn workshop, please know that we will cover the same content and provide the same overview, but we're hoping that we'll have more time for discussion today. So before we dive into the discussion, we have a few reminders for you for how to engage through Zoom today. So please rename yourself in the participant list to include your name and affiliation. And to do that, you can open the participants list and you can right-click your name and select rename. You should mute your microphone unless you're speaking or you're in a breakout group discussion. We encourage everyone to keep their videos on if you're able to, especially in breakout groups. You can raise your hand to notify us that you have a question or a comment. And if you don't find the raise hand button, you should also look under the react button. You can add your questions into the Q&A box throughout the presentation, and we'll try to respond to some of these questions in real time. And finally, you can message my colleague, Casey Hart, if you have any technical difficulties. And please know that this workshop is being recorded. So this program has been in the works for a few years, and we're excited to walk you through some key milestones and lessons learned. We know you all bring different perspectives and experiences with natural resource asset management, so we're really looking forward to a rich conversation today. Our goals for today are to give you an overview of the program, and we want to leave you with practical ideas and inspiration you can take back and apply in your own work. So here's how this workshop is structured. We will start with introductions and the program overview. And after that, we'll move into breakout group discussions and wrap up with general takeaways. And since we have a great group on the call today, please take a moment to drop your name and organization into the chat. And you may wonder, how do I participate in the focus group discussion? So Casey, I'll turn it over to you for a quick overview of that.
Thanks, Dana. Yes, so later in the meeting, we will be doing breakout rooms, and we'll have 5 breakout rooms, and you'll be able to select your topic of interest, as you can see on this slide. We'll go over this again later, so you don't have to remember it all now. You'll be able to choose your room by clicking the breakout rooms icon in Zoom down at the bottom. And you'll be able to transition across rooms at any time if you wish to change to a different discussion and go to a different breakout room. And I'll be in the main meeting room, so if you have any troubles, I'll be there and can help navigate you. And I think that's about it, but we'll go over instructions later.
Thanks, Casey. And thanks everyone for adding your names and the organizations into the chat. So now I'd like to introduce the KNRAMP team and some of the members who've been supporting this work. So we'll start with the county, and then one person from each group will introduce their full team to keep things moving. So as you go, please share your name, organization, and role. So Kirby, would you like to kick us off and introduce the county team?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining the KNRAMP Cross Jurisdictional Workshop. It's my honor to introduce the Kitsap County Natural Resource Asset Management team. So my name is Kirby Mesablu-Yobek. I also want to introduce Brittany Gordon, the project manager from the county, Jim Rogers, long range planning representative, Jonathan Rain, our GIS analyst, Doug Adams, also GIS analyst from Public Works Stormwater, Sean O'Leary from Public Works Stormwater, and Irene Weber from Kitsap County Parks.
Thanks so much, Kirby. Chloe, would you like to go next?
Hi, my name is Chloe Donaldson, and I'm the Environmental Program Manager of the Port Gamble Squalum Tribe. And with the Port Gamble Squalum Tribe team today, we also have Marla Powers, who is the environmental planner for the program. Roma Call is the Natural Resources Department Director, but she is not able to attend this meeting today, although she does keep track of these processes and will be filled in on what we talked about.
Thanks, Chloe. Steve, I'll go to you next.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Steve Todd, salmon recovery biologist with the Suquamish tribe, and I'm joined also by Allison O'Sullivan, who is the tribe's ecosystem recovery program manager. Good to be here.
Thanks, Steve. Lisa, do you want to introduce the Skokomish team?
Sure, I'm Lisa Beliveau. I'm the Habitat Programs Manager here for the Skokomish Indian Tribe. And with us also is Bruce Wisecotton, who is our environmental planner. Thanks.
Thanks, Lisa. Mindy, I'll go to you next.
Hi, everyone. Mindy Roberts. I'm the Puget Sound Program Director for Washington Conservation Action and Education Fund. And later you'll be hearing from my colleague Robinson Lowe, who is our Habitat Policy Senior Manager.
Thanks, Mindy. And Elizabeth, I'll go to you.
Thanks, Dana. Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth McManus. I'm the managing principal at Ross Strategic. We're working with Washington Conservation Action to support this project. And you've already met my colleagues, Dana Stefan and Casey Hart.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And thanks, everyone, for these introductions. And these are the faces of the KNRAMP program. Before we move into the program overview, we're honored to have some brief remarks from DNR about why this particular project grabbed their attention and why they chose to support it. So, Brittany, I'll turn it over to you to introduce Rebecca.
Yeah, I just wanted to introduce Rebecca Brown from the Department of Natural Resources, who is one of the folks on the Habitat Strategic Initiative lead that funded the final development of this program. So Rebecca, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And thanks for the introduction, Brittany. So the Habitat SIL Strategic Initiative Lead is a program co-led by the Department of Natural Resources and the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And we are funded through a cooperative agreement with EPA. So we're fully federally funded. And our work is to advance habitat priorities in the Puget Sound region. And we focus on recovering healthy shorelines, protecting marine vegetation, so like kelp and eelgrass, that sort of thing, connecting floodplains and estuaries, and preventing unchecked development in important ecological areas such as forests, farmlands, and riparian areas. And our program advances these goals through strategic planning, convening partners, and targeted funding. And with advice and input from our advisory team, we issue investment plans that guide our priorities for funding projects. So in 2022, one of our priorities was changing planning paradigms, and that with a focus on integrating habitat recovery priorities and nature-based solutions into planning and implementation frameworks in Puget Sound. So we were really thrilled to receive the application from Kitsap County and be able to fund KNRAMP, because this project really hits the nail on the head in terms of changing planning paradigms and like really focusing on habitat priorities. And then in addition to all the partnerships that this program, as you heard, so many team members, huge number of partnerships throughout this. There's a lot of partnership building in this that we also really like to emphasize. So the program has a potential to protect and restore these shorelines, estuaries, floodplains, and riparian areas that are so important to our Puget Sound recovery. And then at the Habitat SIL, we also like to emphasize funding for innovative projects that can be replicated. And so the KNRAMP is also falls into that bucket. It's innovative, it can be replicated and expanded throughout the Puget Sound. And we want to be able to share these successes and these ideas throughout the Puget Sound. So I'm so excited to see so many people on the call today because it seems like there's a lot of interest in this program, and hopefully we can expand this idea of how to protect our natural resources. And I'm really hoping that you'll be inspired to try a similar program in your jurisdiction. And it's really programs like these that can fundamentally change the way we protect and restore our natural resources. So it's really exciting. And alas, I can't stay for this whole workshop, but I'm going to be watching the recording and really interested to hear what comes out of it. So thank you everyone.
Thanks so much, Rebecca, and thank you for those welcome remarks and for your continued support of this work. Chloe, I think you wanted to introduce an additional member as well of the team, so I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry about that. I realized our habitat biologist is also with us. So Michael Higgins is the habitat biologist for the Port Gamble Squalum tribe as well.
Thanks so much, Chloe. So as we transition into the presentation, would love to hear from you. We will be using an interactive poll today. So Casey is going to add the link to the poll in the chat in a minute here. So just click the link in the chat to join the poll. And what we'd like to hear from you is to please share one benefit that comes to mind when you think about natural resources like streams, shorelines, or forests. So we'll give people a minute to navigate to the poll. And you can also scan the code on the screen as well, the QR code, and that will open the poll on your screen. And as you do that, I'll mention that we did the same exercise in June, and I appreciated everyone's participation. We had great responses. Your responses today are building on the responses that we received in June. So what you will see on the screen is an aggregated view of all this input. This is amazing. Thanks, everyone. I'm seeing water, habitat, clean, health, salmon, recreation, and I see people are still providing the responses. And thanks, everyone, for that. I appreciate all your input, and it shows the critical role that natural resources play in our communities. And we may use this word cloud in future presentations because this is great. So with that, I would say we can move into the heart of today's discussion. We will start with an overview of the program and with perspectives from the KNRAMP team. And then we'll then move into breakout groups for a deeper discussion and then come back together to share key takeaways. And as you're listening to the presentation today, feel free to type your questions into the Q&A box, and we'll try to respond to some of them in real time. And we can also address the rest in breakout groups. So with that, we'll start sharing our screen with the slides. And Brittany is going to kick us off for the presentation. So Brittany, take it away.
Hi. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for being here to share in this program with us. I am Brittany Gordon. I'm the Natural Resource Coordinator at Kitsap County, and I've been managing this program for a few years. We are in the final stages of development and early stages of implementation, and excited to get some feedback from you all. So for many years, Kitsap County, like many other Washington counties, has struggled to protect natural resources while keeping up with the changing landscapes and ongoing population growth and development. Too often, natural resource management has taken a reactive approach, striving to minimize losses and struggling to regain ecological functions that have been lost by past land use decisions. So the KNRAMP program is changing planning paradigms to be more proactive. And we're doing that through acknowledgement that natural resources are shared community assets in the public trust to be stewarded by the local government. That is at the foundation of this program. And we have a vision to proactively manage, inventory, assess, protect, and improve our natural assets in Kitsap County. The program will be used to inform county planning and decision-making frameworks across all county departments that overlap with natural assets. And the program will also be used to improve our collaboration with partners, both internal and external, to implement specific actions that protect and improve natural assets. And all of this work works toward a vision to treat natural resources as assets in the community trust to be stewarded by the local government. And our aim is to bring natural resources to the forefront of asset management decision-making across the county. Next slide. And so as we've seen, and you are all very well aware, natural resources provide community services, very important services to our community, and thus are assets. Next slide, please. And so why would we want to treat natural resources as assets, and why would we want to manage them as assets? Well, as we just mentioned, natural resources provide a variety of services to our communities and to our ecosystems. And so the term asset management has been traditionally used by managers of built infrastructure systems in the public trust, and is a term that refers to treating the components of the public infrastructure system as assets within the public trust to be stewarded by the local government. And so natural resources asset management is an approach that applies that same approach to treating natural resources as assets that should be managed with the same consideration to costs of services and investment priorities as built infrastructure. Next slide. And I'm going to introduce my colleague, Jim Rogers, to tell us a little bit about level of service.
Thanks, Brittany. So when we're looking at level of service for our natural assets, we decided to think of them along the lines of like you would a hard asset, like roads, for example. We go out and look at the current condition, or when we're forecasting future conditions of service for one of our assets, we assign it a level of service. And in our case, just like roads or something, or sewers or anything else, we're using the A through F rating system, where A is a really good river or road, and F is a poorly functioning asset. And this helps us describe the asset's current condition. And like I said, we can also predict future levels of service. And that helps us set minimum standards or goals for these assets as we work into the future. And so that's where our desired level of service comes in. So this is a level of service that we hope to maintain or get back to if the level of service is low. And so we define our level of service for natural assets based on federal, state, and county policies and our long-term goals for asset management and climate adaptation. Back to you, Brittany.
Thanks, Jim. Next slide, please. And so we've been working since 2018 with a core team of natural resource and asset management professionals with local expertise that represent local tribes and also county departments and divisions. We've been funded through the EPA's National Estuary Program since 2018, first through the Stormwater Strategic Initiative Lead, and then through the Habitat Strategic Initiative Lead, which is helping us wrap up development of the program. The core team has been instrumental in collaborative decision-making that is guided by science policy and shared priorities, including emphasizing ecosystem services beyond monetary and economic value. They've helped us to select our 3 priority natural assets, our key attributes and the data sources that we use. They've helped us to define management units for each asset. They've helped us to select pilot watersheds for implementation, which were initially Big Beef and Chico Creeks. The core team has helped us to identify science-based desired level of service and level of service thresholds, to develop implementation strategies and actions, and to implement those strategies and actions, and also to help us connect with additional implementation partners. And so we'd like to say a big thanks and shout out to our core team, which includes the staff you've been introduced to today from Suquamish Tribe, Fort Campbell Sklallam Tribe, and most recently the Skokomish Indian Tribe, as well as our Kitsap County departments. And we're grateful for our ongoing support from Washington Conservation Action, Education Fund, and Ross Strategic. Next slide, please. And so one of the major decisions that our core team had to make was which assets and attributes would be included in the program initially. And so the 3 assets that were selected based on a representation of ecological services as well as available data were forests, streams, and marine shorelines. And we do intend long-term to adaptively manage the program if needed to pull in additional assets. But for now, these are our 3 that we are tracking. And each of these 3 assets is the condition is scored based on certain attributes, and the attributes were selected based on having reliable, available data for most of the county. And so for forests, the level of service is determined by a combination of scores for forest cover and forest successional class. For streams, the attributes that are used to calculate the level of service score are riparian vegetation cover, biological condition through BIBI, the benthic index of biotic integrity, the water quality score, and a fish passage score. And then the 3 attributes that feed into the marine shoreline asset score is shoreline armoring, riparian vegetation, and water quality. And we'll get into those more. Next, please. Data and technology have also played a really critical role in helping us develop this program. It's important to know that natural asset management is platform agnostic. So whatever type of technology database your jurisdiction uses could probably be adapted. GIS has been really helpful as well. And so at Kitsap County, we are using 2 programs. One is called Cartograph, which is a geospatial asset management software and database that's traditionally used for built assets. Our Public Works Department uses it. And we also use GIS, which most people are familiar with, which is a geospatial mapping software and database. And Cartograph and GIS kind of talk to each other pretty well. And when we select data sets, it was important that we chose data sets that were geospatially available, that were updated regularly. And we preferred data sets that were hosted by public agencies because we felt that there was a certain level of quality assurance and review that went into those data sets. Next, please. And so when we break all of our assets into smaller management units and then assign a level of service score to each management unit based on the attributes that were discussed, our Cartograph and GIS databases generate maps that look like this and can be zoomed in on to look at each management unit and see what the overall level of service score is and what the individual score is for each attribute that contributes to that overall level of service score. And so we have maps for the shoreline asset, we have maps for the stream asset, and we have maps for the forest asset. And you can see that these are divided into smaller management units. Next slide, please. And this is a little bit complicated, but really useful in that it shows how the different attributes scores contribute to the overall asset score in a specific management unit. So if we look at marine shorelines, for example, we can see that the 3 attributes that would contribute to a marine shoreline level of service score are percentage of shoreline armoring, percentage of shoreline vegetation, and the shellfish growing area classification. And so if we had shoreline armoring that was between 25 and 50%, for example, then the unit would get a medium score for shoreline armoring. And there's actually a numerical score that goes along with that. And then for shoreline vegetation, if it was, say, 40% to 55%, that would get a low score for shoreline vegetation. And then depending on what the shellfish growing area classification is, it would get a score for that too. And then Cartograph takes all 3 of those scores into account and generates a level of service score. And depending on where that score fits on our scale, the unit would get a level of service condition score of either very low, low, medium, high, or very high. Next screen, please. And so when we look at the final condition scores or the level of service score for a management unit, we have decided that anything that is scoring medium or lower is below our desired level of service. With our core team, we decided that our desired level of service for all assets across the county would be high. So we are always trying to get our management units up to a high level of service. And if they're already at a high or a very high level of service, we're looking to protect the functions and keep them there. So anything below a high level of service, we'd be looking at strategies to restore function, and anything that's above high, at or above high, we'd be looking to protect function. Next, please. Robinson, is this one you?
Yes, yeah, this is where I
Okay.
jump in. Thanks, Brittany.
Thanks.
Brittany kind of talked through how we break up these management units and how we score the different attributes. So I'll kind of talk through what we've done over the last year and a half or so. We kind of started to roll this program out, and kind of test run this program in 2024 on 2 pilot watersheds, Chico Creek and Big Beef Creek. And we generated these maps to look at where the management units are below our desired level of service of high and where they are at or above, to kind of create some scenarios and actions to improve the management units that are currently below the desired level of service, kind of up to that goal of high. And so the actions for streams or marine shorelines included removing existing shoreline armoring and identifying any pollution areas through PIC programs. For riparian, we noticed there was a lot of fish passage barriers in these watersheds, and so actions were to correct those full blockage fish passage barriers, as well as protect and expand any healthy riparian vegetation. And then for upland forests, we looked to identify areas of mature legacy forests and work with our partners to acquire or protect those stands. And you'll see at the bottom of each of these, there are some potential partners that could be utilized in these actions. It's not an exhaustive list, but it was just the players that we wanted to start with. So go ahead to the next slide, Dana. And I'm going to walk through an example of kind of how we identified these actions with a marine shoreline area on Big Beef Creek. So here's a management unit that you can see is currently below our desired level of service. It has a rating of medium. And you can see the shoreline armoring has a very low rating. The score is 14. You'll see the percentage on the next slide, but as we look through the attributes here, we see that's its limiting factor. There's a lot of shoreline armoring, and so we wanted to focus actions to reduce the percentage of shoreline armoring to kind of improve the level of service of this shoreline. So go ahead to the next slide. And here's a bit more detail of it. So you can see on the left, the percentage of shoreline armoring in this management unit is about 82%. So it's pretty highly armored, which is limiting a lot of the ecosystem services and shoreline functionality from occurring in this shoreline. And so we looked at how much we needed to reduce the percentage of shoreline armoring in order to reach that desired level of service of high, which is at that 60 threshold. And we calculated, kind of did a little Moneyball scenario if you're familiar with the movie, but we saw how much we needed to decrease it. We have to decrease shoreline armoring to 49% in order to reach that desired level of service. And so we binned this up with some other prioritization data sets, including Fish and Wildlife's beach strategies and Hood Canal Coordinating Council high priority shoreline areas for improvement. We binned all that information up along with our KNRAMP data, and we shared it with our partners at Shore Friendly to help them do targeted outreach to private landowners along the stretch of shoreline and see how we can kind of incentivize them to remove that privately owned shoreline armoring. And go ahead to the next slide. I think it's back to you, Brittany.
Yeah, and so another need that we identified during implementation of the KNRAMP program in our pilot watershed of Big Beef Creek, we recognized that our stream asset map was not comprehensive and there was a need for additional stream mapping improvements. And so we contracted with Wild Fish Conservancy to provide updated stream mapping and water typing surveys. Next slide, please. And so they're still in the process of finalizing their data, but you can see here in this map how many different data points they took. And so we're hoping to have a much more comprehensive stream map. And we recognize that that is a gap across the county that we're dedicated to continuing progress toward. Next, please. And then now I wanted to talk a little bit about the county-wide implementation and adaptive management of the program. And so as we've wrapped up with implementation in the pilot watersheds, we're getting an idea of what we want this to look like across the entire county. And so some of the kind of annual actions that we have decided will be part of this program include an annual review process with our core team and our county departments that produces an annual level of service status assessment where we will identify the current levels of service for assets across the county and any changes from the previous review period. We would meet with our core team advisory group to look at our level of service maps and identify any areas or actions that we want to advance in the coming year. We would engage with partners, both within and outside the county, to share the level of service data and any actions, as well as specific focus areas, to help inform priorities in the upcoming planning processes for the year. And then we would continue to monitor the level of service status, adaptively manage the program, and also monitor our data sources to make sure that they are adequate in the coming year. Next, please. And with all of that, we would want to produce annually a state of the natural assets report, where we would report out on any changes in level of service, any areas of improvement or decline, any priority geographies for either protection or restoration, any recommended actions for implementation, and then partnership opportunities and strategies for implementing those actions. Next, please. And so we coordinate with a lot of groups, and this slide just shows how some of the different groups that could help us to implement the actions that could be identified in our annual report. Next slide, please. And so when we talk about stewarding natural assets, we're talking about at the county-wide scale, which means with all the different departments that overlap with natural resources and natural assets, there are opportunities to implement different strategies to protect and improve our natural asset condition and our level of service. So that could include things like replacing fish passage barriers and removing shoreline armoring that's associated with roadways. It could include helping to clean up derelict vessels that are overseen by our law enforcement, and a wide range of other actions that overlap with natural assets. Next slide, please. Jim, do you want to talk about the comp plan for a sec?
Yeah, so this last year in 2024, we updated our countywide comprehensive plan, and we incorporated KNRAMP as a program into that plan pretty thoroughly. We actually included a goal to formally treat natural environments and ecosystems, including forests, shorelines, freshwater systems, and critical areas as essential assets that we plan for, manage, and invest in the county and for now and for future generations. And so what we did was we included it as a tool to be used, and we included it in our land use chapter, our environment chapter, our new climate change chapter, our capital facilities chapter, our parks, rec, and open space, and we even included it as a tool in our capital facilities plan. And we did leave it open. Right now, we're producing our first report. This is the first year that we're actually trying to implement this plan, as Brittany said, and so this will be the kind of like the baseline year going forward to look at levels of service and look at them going forward, and have our other capital facilities like roads and stormwater use this as a tool when they're looking at how they plan for their asset improvements.
Yeah.
Brandon?
Thanks. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, and as Jim said, incorporating this and institutionalizing the KNRAMP program into our comprehensive plan is really essential to helping us be effective when we use it in specific planning processes. And so you have the overarching comprehensive plan, and then underneath that umbrella, you have, individual planning processes within each county department and division that include things like our capital facilities planning, our stormwater comprehensive planning, our transportation improvement program, our parks, recreation, and open space plan, land use planning and zoning, and even down to our salmon recovery and watershed plans and our long range planning. And so we can use the data and the information that we gain from KNRAMP to bring into the planning spaces for each of these different programs that help to implement different sections of the comprehensive plan. And we can use the KNRAMP to identify multi-benefit opportunities, such as where to prioritize water quality improvements, where to focus on fish passage or bulkhead removal, where to work with partners on land acquisition or transfer of development rights type opportunities, and where to focus restoration investments. We can also use KNRAMP to help us identify where to locate new or replacement facilities and utilities, or maybe where to relocate those from. We can use it to help support funding applications, to identify additional information needs and data gaps. As a public communication and transparency tool, the public's starting to get interested in these maps and what they tell us about natural assets in our county. And then finally, and probably most importantly, KNRAMP will help us as a county to track our progress toward not only no net loss, but toward net ecological gain countywide, and to help evaluate the effectiveness of our planning and implementation of our comprehensive plan. Next slide. And this one's Mindy.
All right, thanks, Brittany, and thanks everyone for hanging in here. We just threw a whole lot of stuff at you. Very dense presentation. Up at the top of everybody's slide, you'll see if you want more time to talk about this, join our breakout groups, and definitely a good spot to ask questions. Because what you're seeing right now is the culmination of many, many years of action. So with lots of lessons learned. And I'll start at the very bottom of this slide, which is that the work that you see today has been adaptive. And it has to be adaptive moving forward. Brittany just talked about the need to measure over time. But under the first bullet is really important, is starting with clarifying what your goals are. Early on, we decided that the goals for these programs are provisioning salmon and shellfish. And then how is this information going to be used? But what you're seeing here, as we have built out the details for the Kitsap case here, is it has to be iterative. And I can assure you our very first step was absolutely not perfection in this world. However, we did take a first step, and then we were able to refine that over time into what you see now, and will definitely evolve in the future as well. But to do that effectively, very strong internal coordination within Kitsap County. Kitsap County has a lot of work that goes toward these natural assets, and this is a way to speak a common language about that, to make sure that the work that's being done in stormwater and parks is also just being tabulated, keep track of all of that good work. There's also a lot of coordination with groups outside of this organization. Brittany flipped through some of the groups that would be involved with implementing this as well. And those external partnerships are incredibly important. And then finally, Brittany talked about Cartograph. If you want to hear more about Cartograph, you can hear from Jonathan and Robinson on this. A really important tool to do it. So again, I just wanted to reiterate, if any of this is it's just coming at you super fast, just know you're seeing a whole lot in a very dense presentation, but the people that you're hearing from and the other parts of our team are more than happy to help you think about if you are considering this for your own jurisdiction.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks to our team for this overview. And thanks to everyone for adding your questions into the chat. And now we'll hear from other members of the KNRAMP team who will provide some perspectives related to their engagement and experience with this program. So Marla, I'll go to you first, and then I'll go to Steve, and then to Lisa, and then to Irene. So Marla, I'll start with you.
Thanks, Dana. Lessons learned. So I'll start with the Port Gamble-Squalum tribe seeks to preserve and protect the rich culture, traditions, language, homelands, and natural resources of the tribe. So KNRAMP has been a way to coordinate and work on an idea that elevates and preserves natural resources and systems. This means that we have been able to identify and include fish passage barriers as an issue the tribe is focused on correcting into an attribute. As an example, this then makes fish passage barriers an asset that needs data, and where data gaps are identified, you get more data, and so you get to understand the issue more holistically. And then fish passage barriers become part of the level of service discussion, and then they become part of the solution, and they get corrected and are annually monitored. And I really want to emphasize that in this process, monitoring is baked in, as Brittany covered very well. It's updated annually. And this allows us to incorporate adaptive management techniques to see where we need to change and what's working and what's not. And that's really important to the tribe. So this is just a quick little example of everything. Everything in this example just speaks to the interest of the tribe for the present and for a very long-term outlook. So just an example. Thank you, Dana.
Thanks so much, Marla. Steve, I'll go to you next.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Great.
We can, well,
offer a few observations, I think some things to highlight from the KNRAMP experience so far. And one is maybe apparent to everyone, and that would be that there are major challenges to improving level of service in the three assets: forest, streams, and marine shorelines. And not to mention to achieving those desired level of service goals. So with that, just, I guess I would emphasize that we need to think and work long-term. As we know, many restoration projects can take 10 years or even longer from sort of conception to finishing project. And so the need to think long-term, and I think Marla alluded to, very long-term thinking about how we get to where we want to be. And then I'll just highlight a few examples where things that are particularly important to the Suquamish tribe and within the ecosystem recovery program, where the tribe is partnering. You heard Brittany talk about partnerships as one of the major things, and where I think we're aligned well with KNRAMP on a few different projects I'll just mention here. One is a fish passage barrier assessment and prioritization project, and we're just starting kind of the last phase of that, where the tribe has assessed over 400 fish passage structures over the past 2 to 3 years. And now we're going to work with Kitsap County on developing a regional prioritization for fixing those fish passage problems. And then also another project with Kitsap County is we're working on a floodplain assessment to look at not only filling data gaps, but the intention is to inform our priorities about where we would, where the best places to protect and restore floodplain connectivity and floodplain function. Similar project the tribe is working on riparian corridors with Western Washington University. And then the last thing I just highlight is along the marine shoreline, is the tribe has found a couple of projects so far to partner with shore-friendly Kitsap in removing armor where there are shoreline landowners that are willing to work in that way. And so, each of these efforts is not only intended to fill data gaps, but inform our priorities for protection and restoration, and that revisiting those metrics over time in an adaptive way. And then I just highlight something that Brittany mentioned that I think is really important on one of her slides, is identifying those multi-benefit opportunities to improve level of service. I'll leave it at that. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Steve. Lisa, I'll go to you next, and Lisa will share why Suquamish has recently joined the team. So Lisa, take it away. Oh, Lisa, I think you're muted.
Yeah, so you mentioned that we have just recently joined this group and the team, and our tribe is very pleased with how this group is working to prioritize habitat function while also recognizing needs of a growing community. I think it's working really well. I'm really happy with this approach, and we encourage others to consider, doing something similar. That's all. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Irene, I'll go to you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Eileen Weber. I'm the Natural Resource Program Supervisor here at Kitsap County Parks. So our Parks Department has about 11,400 acres of parkland. About 9,000 of those acres are large open space type parks that are between, a couple hundred to a couple thousand acres in size. So one of the ways that our department has been using this information developed through KNRAMP is frequently, we'll have somebody come to us or park staff will identify a potential parcel that may want to be added into our park network. A lot of times these are just kind of added in without any real critical thought. And so one thing that we've developed this year is a pre-acquisition environmental assessment that we would do on a property prior to bringing it into our system. So in that process, we look at the landscape context of the parcel. Is the parcel connected to any sort of, habitat corridors? Is it contiguous with another park? Is it adding to a watershed protection goal? As well as we, if possible, it's not always possible, we try to get on site to look at the conditions of the vegetation, the forest, any wildlife components, wetlands and waterways. So in the process of doing this, one of the things that we look at when we look at landscape context is the KNRAMP levels of service values within the park. So we did a big report on Rood Road, some parcels over in that area to potentially bring into the Parks Department portfolio of lands that's managed. And one of the things we looked at was the forest. This is a large forested parcel, the level of service of the forests in that area. In this area, the level of service was ranked as medium, largely due to the early successional stage of much of the forest. And so a couple of the units that we were looking at to bring possibly into the Parks Department had forests that are in the maturation 1 stage of stand development, so older, more mature forests. So as part of the write-up for the justification for why we would want to bring these parcels into Parks Department for open space conservation is because they have those mature forests on them, and that may help elevate the level of service within that KNRAMP area if they are brought into our open space program for protection. So that's one of the ways that we've been using KNRAMP so far.
Thanks so much, Erin, and thanks to our team for sharing these perspectives. I see a few questions and resources in the chat, and thanks everyone for engaging throughout the presentation. I would say let's share the slide with the breakout groups again. So we've got 5 groups for today. And some of the questions that you have in the chat will be addressed in the breakout groups as well. So you will see the breakout groups listed on the slide. We have 5 groups. The first one will focus on building the KNRAMP foundation. So we'll walk you through how we build the framework, the data, and the technology. And I've seen a few questions in the chat related to how different attributes like forest cover were calculated. So if you're curious to learn more, feel free to join this group for a deeper dive. The second group will focus on early actions for launching KNRAMP, including funding and partnerships. The third breakout group will focus on implementation, including monitoring and adaptive management. The fourth group will cover the county planning, specifically efforts to integrate KNRAMP into comprehensive and capital plans. And then finally, the fifth group will focus on partnerships and specifically how partners can support KNRAMP from adjacent sectors. So the goal of these discussions in the breakout groups is to gather your thoughts, feedback, and lessons learned based on what you heard from the presentation. What you share will be used to also inform how we continue to develop the program. So your feedback and insights are helpful to us. And this is part of our adaptive management approach as we're still learning as we go. There won't be any formal presentations in the breakout groups, just open discussion. And the members of our core team will be in each group to help answer questions and guide the conversation. And feel free to ask questions and share your experiences or just listen in. And we want to emphasize that these breakout groups are learning spaces. There is no pressure to speak if you prefer to listen and absorb the conversation and just learn about natural resource asset management. So feel free to join and just listen in or participate as you feel comfortable. So you can choose whichever group interests you most, and you're welcome to move between groups if you'd like to be part of more than one conversation. And as you see here on the screen, you can click on the breakout room. So once you're in your group, you can click on the breakout rooms in Zoom, and that will allow you to select a different breakout group. And we ask you to not move maybe to more than 2 or 3 groups, just to allow for continuity of discussions. Leads will remain with their breakout groups. And if you get lost, Casey will remain in the main room. So if you need any help, she can direct you to the right group. And after that, we'll have time in plenary to share a few takeaways. And with that, I think, Casey, we're ready to launch the groups.
All right, so thanks for joining our Framework Data and Technology Breakout Room discussion. My name is Robinson Lowe. I'm the Habitat Policy Senior Manager at Washington Conservation Action Education Fund. And I'm here with Jonathan Rain, who's a GIS analyst with Kitsap County. Looks like Doug Adams is also here working with Kitsap County, and we've been doing kind of the majority of the work on the GIS and the cartograph analysis and map making. I kind of wanted to start off with a general question to you all. If your group that you're with, representing here, have thought about natural asset management, have kind of where you're at in this journey, if this is brand new to you, or how you see a program like this working towards the goals that you have within your jurisdiction or your tribe or your city or whatever it is. So just kind of a flyer out there to get people talking and thinking, if there's anyone that wants to jump in.
I can speak.
Yeah, thank you.
My name is Crystal Kyer. I'm a floodplain planner with Pierce County Planning and Public Works. We do a lot of projects, capital projects for like levee setback projects and habitat projects. We understand the importance and the values, and we've done an economic assessment of those values, in fact, but I don't think, to my knowledge, we haven't really thought about managing them as assets. So I think this is really interesting to me, and I don't know anything about it, but I'm here to learn and listen and find out more, bring this back to my team.
Awesome.
So thank you.
It's
really exciting. Here. I think it's great.
Great. That's great to know. Yeah, really interested to see, how you all are thinking about using a program like this. Jasmine, I saw you come off mute.
Yeah, I'll just say hello. I'm Jasmine Carr with King County. I only just joined King County last week, so I'm brand new, but this is one of the projects I'm getting on board with is figuring out a natural asset management system in the Water and Land Resources Division in King County. So the team's been working on it for about a year or so, but still in the early phases, and I'm just getting onboarded on that effort. And Michael Murphy, our Open Space Acquisition Unit Supervisor, was hoping to join today and couldn't, so I'm just here on a fact-finding and listening mission.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us. Yeah, if he has any questions, feel free to direct them to us.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Joel Mann with Pierce County Rural Forestry and the Planning and Public Works here. Also pretty new, just it was week 5 for me, but I'm kind of trying to wrap my head around, how to do forest land conservation throughout the whole county. So this is a really interesting approach that you guys are taking to sort of ranking that. And one quick question I had is, did you, in your ranking here, rank all forest land in the county, or just that was owned by a public agency?
Yeah, we looked at land across the entire county. We're using the high resolution change detection data set with Department of Fish and Wildlife, and so that is countywide. Even in downtown Bremerton, we have a score for management units that overlap with cities that aren't necessarily like rural forest land, and that does it makes you realize how difficult it can be to improve forest cover when you have a mishmash of parcels of private and public ownership. But it is looking countywide across every piece of land in the county.
And that's forest cover across on a parcel basis or on the forested parts of a parcel?
Go ahead, Jonathan.
So yeah, we divided, well, before Robinson and I were part of this group, they set up sort of what they call management units. I'm going to share my screen really quick.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
And then I can just show you. This is from the web, from the story map that we mentioned earlier. So this is just a map of our forest assessment units, and so they're based on I think part of watersheds. I can't remember exactly how they were established, but and so these are, you can sort of see as you zoom in, they're kind of large units. You can see the gray boundaries, and they're all different shapes and sizes. So it's not on a per parcel basis, it's on a per management unit basis. And we can give you a little bit more information. I can send it to you afterwards about how those management units were set up.
Okay, that would be great. Yeah, because I was looking at the the standard of forest cover. Doesn't make that much sense if you're looking just at the forested part of a parcel, but if you're looking at a bigger area, then that totally makes sense.
Exactly. And there's, it's really interesting as we start looking at these things too, because, the assessment units were made sort of independently of, they were made independently of what's happening there. Like we don't necessarily put all of a park in one assessment unit or those kind of things. So like we'll have, like in some of our larger heritage parks, it'll split across like 3 or 4 assessment units. So it's kind of interesting how those things influence those scores, I guess. And
yeah, I believe the forest management units were sub-watershed level, like different drainages of different tributaries within a watershed, like in a more complex watershed like Chico Creek. There's a couple different tributaries that split off from Chico Creek, and so the management units above the streams were broken down into these forest watershed units that kind of all drained in the same direction and ended in the same space. So
very cool. One other really quick question, if you don't mind.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Did you factor into these at all risk of conversion to non-forest land in your assessment of condition?
No. So the way that we assess condition is just based on forest cover and percent mature forest cover, which we defined through the USGS land fire data set. That in the threat of conversion is something that we are taking into account as like a qualitative data as we look at these management units or look at watersheds that we think have the possibility to become developed. If they're very close to or overlapping with a UGA, we can assume that those are going to be in more risk of development. And so when we're looking at protection measures or restoration measures, we're taking this into account as we decide kind of what actions are needed to improve or protect the level of service of these different management units. So it's not something that's built into the score, but it's something that we take into account once we start looking at kind of what actions are needed to either protect or restore the regions we're focusing on.
Yeah, I just put in the chat the link to the story map, and if you get in there and just kind of want to look around and click around in areas, you can get into the maps are interactive, so you can actually click on the maps and assessment units that are interesting to you. You can sort of see the scores for each thing if that's of interest. I'm gonna stop sharing now.
Awesome. I guess, yeah, there's a lot of information, like Mindy said, we're throwing a lot of information at you all. So if you have any, this is also a space for clarifying questions, even if it seems really basic. We've been thinking about this. There's a lot of jargon in this program as well. We've been thinking about and working in this for a while now, and so it feels normal to us, but I recognize this is a very new way of thinking about natural resource asset management and just resource management in general. So if you have any just general questions, I'm happy to answer them as best I can.
I also just want to say something that I think Brittany mentioned in her presentation that I think is really important, is just that we view this as being sort of like program agnostic. Like you don't have to have Cartograph, you don't have to have ArcGIS Online or any of those kind of things. You just have to have data that's, and you don't even have to use the data we're using. Like these are just the things that we found that made sense for us. There's a lot of other really good data sets out there if you're either in a smaller area or just have different data than what we have. It's just that when we were looking for things across the entire county, these were the data sets that made sense to us to use. And it's also been a constant evolution. Robinson and I meet weekly to discuss ways we can improve our data processing. So I think that it's really important when you think about this is just to really think about what makes sense for your organization, the size of the organization you're in, if it's county or city or whatever. Just really make sure you think about those things, and you can you sort of choose the things that are best for you.
Yeah, building off that, KNRAMP, the program was kind of based around and built around the protection and restoration of salmon habitat, and then also for the county to more effectively manage their critical areas. But if your jurisdiction, county, or whatever city is really looking at, if you're looking at protecting against wildfire, you can find data sets that are kind of specific to fuel on the ground or things like that. Like it could be whatever you want it to be. This is just a way that we've developed it in Kitsap County for the goals of the county. And Jal, I see your message in there. I do have some old documents about the discussions. It was a long process to try and figure out how to break these management units up into kind of strategic and measurable areas. I think originally that was just in like hexagonal patterns, and then it was developed further into this kind of sub-watershed basin scale. So I can surely find some documents from back before Jonathan and I started that kind of go through these discussions. But it was an iterative process. It wasn't perfect right away. And like Jonathan said, we're still constantly building on this, meeting with different jurisdictions, trying to speak the same language. That's really what this program is trying to do, is speak the same language as the other departments that are working towards the same goals, like parks. We need to be able to define mature forest and talk about that and mean the same thing when we're talking about how we protect our mature forests. So yeah, it's something that we're constantly working on and expanding.
It's great. That's why I'm here, because for Pierce County and Kitsap County should definitely be speaking the same language and all these things.
Exactly, even cross jurisdictions.
Doing.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. I appreciate you being here. That's very cool. We'll definitely follow up afterward. Any other questions, clarifying questions? I do have some leading questions maybe I can pull up, but I want to kind of, let you all drive this discussion if there's something that we can help you with, or if there's just curiosities that you have about the program.
I'm Kathleen Hurley. I'm with the Port of Seattle, and I'm curious if you could share a little bit more as you were sort of in the early phases of envisioning this. You mentioned working on prioritizing habitat for salmon, for salmon, and I'm wondering how you went about collecting data on kind of variety of indicators and opportunities, I guess, too, within the geographic area. I'm curious kind of like what was the structure at the beginning in terms of building this and moving to where you are now? Yeah, no, it's a really good question, because there are so many different attributes or indicators that we could have chosen, and we could have had 15 attributes for streams to try and measure level of service. But we wanted to start and this is all secondhand, I'll say. Jonathan and I weren't here at the beginning years and kind of the real sausage making of this program. But we wanted to make it kind of easy early on. We didn't want to overcomplicate things right away, knowing that we can always add in more information if we have a good data set. We also wanted to use proxy data as much as we could. This program didn't have funding to go out and do like surveys on the land and gather data. So we had to use data sets that were already available and developed across the whole county. And I know originally there were thoughts of using impervious surface cover and, like flow rate in streams and things like that. I think some of them were kind of left aside because they didn't have data across the whole county. Originally, I think in early on workshops, the core team talked about what sort of indicators or attributes would be important for each asset. And there was a huge list of them. And they kind of went through and talked about them, about which ones make sense, which ones could be overlapping, and how many of these data sets can mean two things, I guess. So
if we think about overall forest cover, that gives us a good percentage of trees and healthy forest area or riparian area, but also to some degree gives us a sense of how much impervious surface cover is there as well. If you have low forest cover percent, you can kind of assume that there's going to be a greater percent of impervious surface rather than an area that has really high forest cover. And so we didn't want to have two attributes that kind of drove towards the same thing or the ecosystem service that we're looking to measure. And we wanted to have measurements of a few different ecosystem services, which is why for streams we have riparian cover, fish passage barriers, water quality data, looking at the E. coli, and then the BIBI index. So we started with a really long list. It was kind of just like throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sort of attributes made sense for the goals that we wanted or what we wanted to measure and monitor, and then slowly kind of sifting through them, having these conversations about which make the most sense, what's available across the whole county, what's a data set that is going to be updated, and things like that. Does that answer your question, Kathleen?
Just to add a little bit to that too, Robinson. And I think you said this, but just to really clarify, drive the point home is when you do these sort of models, it's really easy to sort of put a lot of variables in that sort of say the same thing. And our scores are based on a combination of those scores. So if you have two variables that are sort of like implying the same thing, then you're basically just giving that thing more weight, I guess. And so that's always really difficult. Like we don't weight our variables. They all have the same. Well, I guess they all have the same weight. They're not weighted differently. So, we just tried to pick things that didn't overlap and sort of told different stories. And again, we're available for the whole county. And one last thing is this is sort of organic. So if we find other variables that make sense or the data improves for other things, then we're happy to put those in. Or if we have better data in an area, we'll try to incorporate that as well.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful.
Yeah, go ahead, Benjamin.
Thanks, Robinson and Jonathan. On that very note, I was going to give people a lot of who had previously participated room to speak, but I was going to ask specifically about that weighting question because it came up last time that we were in this room in this workshop. And the point being made that the decision not to weight these different criteria is itself a decision to weight. It's saying that these different components of the surface score have the same contribution. And I think that the suggestion that I brought up at the time was that we look into the degree of variance in these different indices over the range, over the full data set, whether there's a possibility to do some multivariate statistical manipulation of the data set to see what are the biggest drivers of variance in the data that you are seeing at the moment, and whether there has been follow-up or additional thinking on the matter of perhaps trying to come up with ways to to weight those different criteria objectively.
No, but I did catch myself when I was saying they weren't weighted, because I remember that same conversation that applying no weight is a weight, but we have not done those analysis, but it is a really good idea, and I think given time and we would really like to do that.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, no, very good point, Benjamin. And I think, like Jonathan has said, this is an ever-evolving program. We wanted to start as simple as we could, just to kind of get things going and see how it would work on the ground and how it would function once it's been implemented across the county. But I think as we kind of start to do dry runs with it or do these pilot programs in different watersheds, we see what works and we see maybe what isn't driving at exactly the right outcome we're looking for or the action. Even recently, Jonathan and I, we're looking at a new set of geographies and trying to figure out, okay, well, we see in a management unit has low riparian cover and we know that it's temperature impaired. Where along this stretch do we need to look at riparian cover improvements? And we notice some of our management units, our stream management units, are really long and don't give us an exact sense of where the work needs to be done. And so we kind of went through an activity of breaking up these management units into a little bit more digestible pieces that would really drive at where we need to see improvements in specific attributes rather than across such a large scale. And so that's just an example of, as we start to roll it out and implement it, we're finding ways to continually improve the data, how we look at it, and how it is easily driven to action rather than seeing a management unit and kind of having a loss of where exactly the work needs to be done. We want it to really just point to it so it's easy. Any other questions, clarifying questions? Ken, not to put you on the spot, you messaged me during the main presentation. Something that Jonathan and I have talked about is this riparian data engine. Jonathan, I don't know if you were there at that rollout for it, but I've been using it recently to really pinpoint a lot of these areas of riparian cover improvement where there's temperature issues. And I see these programs really, really supporting each other. At least the riparian data engine I could see very much helping the KNRAMP mapping and actions within the county. So I don't know if you want to speak to how you see the overlap with it or your interest in this program in general.
No, I was kind of curious of how I've never heard of natural resource asset management, so I was just kind of curious and wanted to poke in. But I'm happy to hear that y'all are using it, and the whole idea behind riparian data engine is I think there was not only just a proviso, but just kind of this more general way of presenting the data that we have in a more usable format that people don't have to use GIS and stuff like that to kind of understand how vegetation is growing and how stream buffers work and stuff like that. So just kind of giving a more visual aspect to it. We did add in like stream temperatures and stuff like that too to support the proviso, and we're looking to hopefully with better budgets kind of tweak it as we go along and maintain it. So yeah, I'm just also looking for feedback and see how other people are using it. So this is good to hear. But yeah, it's available to anybody. It does require the new SAW account login. So that's kind of the way they're trying to move into it. So to use it, but it's still pretty easy to access otherwise.
Great. Yeah, no, I have been using that tool. I'm still learning a bit about it, but if I find anything of use that could kind of help KNRAMP, I'm happy to reach out to you and see if we can get on a meeting together. So thanks for being here.
For sure. Yeah.
I'm just curious, is there a particular document that is most helpful to look through for all the different characteristics or criteria you looked at using and why or why you didn't use them? Or we're just looking through the story map and PowerPoint slides be the best for that?
The story map will help you. I do have some other documents that I can share with you that we developed at Washington Conservation Action early on in the process of just kind of like recaps of the discussions at the different workshops where we talked about all the different attributes, what made sense, what we could use as proxies for. So I'll dig those up and I can email you, I think.
Okay.
Do you want to drop your email in the chat?
Yes,
I think we actually have it from your registration too, but yeah, I'll find some documents to send to you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. I don't know if any of this information would be helpful to you, Dave or Ben or Ken, either of you. But if you ever are curious about any of the early stages of this program, we have a lot of documentation of that. There is a breakout room, not to say you should leave this one, but there is a breakout room that focuses on the early years and talks about kind of funding and really the early process. So if you're interested in that, I would suggest jumping over there.
Yeah, I think that's some where we're at now. We've got kind of some initial ideas of what we would like to have in Tumwater. I'm the stormwater coordinator for Tumwater, so
great.
And we've got some initial work that we've done as far as delineating some catchment areas or some subbasins and whatnot, but trying to apply some of the different metrics and things. We're still not sure exactly what we want to use for that, but yeah, the funding mechanism I think is the biggest one right now. Trying to there is a lot of support from council and management to do something like this, but it's such a huge idea at this time to try to convey and interpret. I think I'm right now I'm looking at the website you guys have, the story map that you guys have provided, and I think this is a good starting point for us to kind of look at and model. So yeah, but yeah, we appreciate you guys making yourselves available to talk to and think about things like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to add to that, Dave, I think this might not be something I should admit, but I that whole concept is something I really struggled with when I first started with, as well as just how to show like the things that people were talking about and how to treat these natural assets as like treated hard assets. It's just a complicated process that I would feel like I had my head around, and then something would slightly change and it would just kind of slip away. And I feel like, the way you've done it makes a lot of sense, but there were also things that could have been done differently for sure, and lessons we've learned along the way that we're sort of incorporating it back into it now. So yeah, I think I just want to validate your thoughts about it being a difficult process to start, because it's a struggle, I think.
So what department does this live in within your jurisdiction? Is it a parks thing? Is it a planning? Is it
community development, which is our planning? Okay. Yeah. So we're very specifically the natural resources side of that. So that's where this lives, is in DCD natural resources.
Okay. That's helpful too. I know that that's kind of where some of our struggles originate from, is just the planning department, and the need for their I guess objectives to make sure UGA and things like that are being met. But adding this piece into it would really kind of help round those discussions out, and balance some of our growth.
Yeah, I think that's it's been great now that we've sort of worked in, but even that part of it, we're still trying to figure out how to roll, like how to use it in our planning and things like that. Just with the idea being that we would have be able to monitor sort of change as it changes over time, but we're still sort of getting the baseline. I think 10 years from now will be a very different story, I think.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
No problem.
I'm gonna hop off now, and I've actually got to jump into another meeting, so appreciate you guys' time.
Thanks,
Dave. Of course. Thanks for being here. Feel free to reach out if you have any other random questions that come up. We're here for it.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you all plan to track any improvements or changes that occur on the ground?
Yeah.
From this?
To some degree, it's a non-regulatory program. We'll be updating the data on an annual basis for certain data sets that are updated annually, like Kitsap Public Health District. Their water quality testing is annual, and we'll update that in BIBI at an annual basis. I know the high resolution change detection has gone through some struggles in updating, and so we'll see if there's similar data sets like that will come out in the future. For now, we're just using that. But we do a lot of outreach to internal partners and other outside partners from the county to see what work they are doing, and kind of check it off a box as like, we know this has been done. It's not going to show up in the data right away, but we know this area is protected. Like, we know this Newberry Hill Park is protected. They're not going to do any clear cutting there. And so we can assume in 20 to 25 years, our mature forest percent will continue to rise slowly. Or we know Great Peninsula Conservancy just acquired a parcel of land along a shoreline that had shoreline armoring. We know they're going to do some work to remove that armoring, so we can assume their armoring is going to go down. So we kind of like have to do it in the background, and it's not going to show up in the data until it shows up in the data. But yeah, we will be tracking that annually.
Yeah, and I think we haven't really worked this in, but I think we're also, especially being in DCD, like we have a unique position where we have, like we get a lot of the permits in, so we could even do it the other way too, right? Like, as if we know there's big projects that we're going to take away, we can sort of account for that as well. So that's not something we've built in yet, but it is something that I think that it would be really important to have that information drive the model, right? Because it's like it gives it more real world application then, and it just makes it truer to what's actually happening on the ground.
Yeah, because I could see this being a good like prioritization tool too for implementing such things.
Yeah.
but it'd be hard if the data is not updated. Like, was this done or was it not done?
Exactly, because like the shoreline armoring, just that data isn't frequently updated, and you know, like there's all these data sets that are amazing, but they're you know, they're a little dated at this point, and well, they don't change a lot for one thing, so we have to make sure that we are accounting for that, you know.
Okay, so this subgroup is talking about lessons learned. How did we all get started in this work? And in particular, it sounds like you both have questions first on relationships within county government and how do you get beyond silos. So we'll talk a little bit about that first. And then Laura, you were talking about what do you do once the grant runs out? Like, how do you make the change stick? So I think those might be kind of helpful things to talk through. Yeah, I think for Kitsap County government, so neither Marla nor I work for Kitsap County government, but we've worked alongside them in a lot of ways. And it is hard because I think any entity, no matter what it is, like you've got your job to do, and there's a lot coming at people all the time now. And Kitsap County, the idea from this came from their Department of Community Development. So within their a little different structure, it sounds like, than in Clallam County. But they were looking at ways of doing things differently and also acknowledging that they want ways of measuring this over time. And so I think that was how Kitsap County came to this. And then the Marla's predecessors from the Port Gamble-Scullum tribe and the Suquamish tribe, you know, we heard as a nonprofit organization, the tribes wanting to do better and do differently on salmon recovery. And so here was a local government that was open to that. And then 2 different tribes at the time, now 3, who just want to figure out how do we do things differently. So I think within county government, and Marla, I think you work with them more than I do. What we've seen is each of the county divisions has a slightly different schedule. Like they have their responsibilities, but they also have a different schedule for decision making and how do you lean in together on common projects. So a few of that's why Kitsap County elected to weave this into their comprehensive plan, because that's also needs to be implemented by so many divisions. And that was a really important decision on their part. It doesn't need, you know, additional authority or anything like that. And frankly, could be done in different iterations of comp plans. Marla, I'm curious if you had any insight into the breaking down of silos or what's been helpful to get all of the different divisions at the table for Kitsap.
They feel like they're pretty self-motivated to break the silos. I think they recognize that the same issues that you have identified, that and they just have, like, Brittany is a force upon herself. And so they have a really great, you know, staff who's motivated and been let loose to like kind of break these silos down. So I think between her and Jim Rogers, they've been a really good team that will take the time to learn the language of like the engineers and the other side, so that they could figure out like how to talk to them with the language that we're developing with this program. And so they learn like level of service is you know, something that planners know well, something that engineers know well. And so they're like, okay, well, we'll use that language in this. And so language, I think, was a similar thing. And then, yeah, putting it into the comp plan, as Mindy said, is a uniting reason to make everyone kind of think the same way. And I've got 20 years of planning under my belt. So I was a planner. I did a lot of long range, a lot of project review. And just even getting departments to participate in your comp plan update process is hard. And so if you give them a little bit of language and a little bit more meaning as to like, we can help you with your project if you help us with ours, and this is the end result, and we have money to do this, so it won't cost you any money, you just need to play nice with us. I think that is helpful. So that's what I saw. And then, you know, they brought in Parks Department for the first time to talk about how they're using this. And I think that the momentum is really going to help move them forward and get others to follow suit too.
So Rebecca, any follow-up questions? Did that get at some of the silos?
Well, so I am under the Department of Community Development. And so I don't have that level of cooperation. when I came on in July, I was just like, I'm looking to the lead planner, you know, I'm looking forward to working with you more, working together more, helping to review critical areas, or, you know, to be that, to look at wetland, all of that stuff, because they don't have that upstairs. Anyone with that background, and the responses that I got was, we're pretty good. We've become pretty self-reliant. We're good. So, and so I keep going to these kind of things. I went to a coastal adaptation workshop yesterday, and I'm just like, okay, I go to this stuff, and my director's great, and he's the one that's like pushing this, but yeah, it's been difficult when there's not that willingness to kind of work together, I guess.
And this is where there might be this, you know, kind of mismatch in timing and decision making, and products that are within different divisions, responsibilities. And Laura, this gets a little bit at your question about how do you make change stick. So the comp plan was one way that I've seen. One of the slides that Brittany covered in the presentation, and I think you'll get a copy of this afterwards, is the capital facilities planning work that needs to happen, the transportation improvement plans, like those are all regular parts of county government. And eventually you would be part of like commenting on those things. So if there is a way that you basically solve everyone's problems more comprehensively, that might be a way to do it. And then like salmon recovery plans for sure, the stormwater planning. So these are all elements that are happening within government. It definitely takes the support and buy-in at maybe the elected official level or the kind of senior manager level as well. But it is a way to do things more efficiently. So for example, on stormwater plans, well, in parks, Marla, you talked about that as well. And you heard Irene talking about it. They're already planning on doing a bunch of stuff. So if there is a way, I call it taking credit for the work of others, but it's basically like, let's document what they're doing under a different part of county government and take credit. Like that's a good thing. And that will lead to improved conditions over time, whether that's in a forest or a stream or a shoreline. But at least so far, there's not been like a common currency within Kitsap County government until we're able to do this kind of mapping exercise. But it feels like, you know, and they're still learning how to do it. They're not all in, you know, one unified chorus at this point. They're figuring out as they go, and they're going to make a couple of these deadlines, but they're going to miss a couple of the others. But yet they can do the outreach within DCD to go to, say, roads, for example, to find out what their plans are. And then to the extent that a project also is one of their priorities for natural assets, like the fish passage barriers, for example, then DCD is able to lift that work up to say, yes, that's a good thing and here's why. And they can actually even start to quantify what the benefits are. So it's gonna take some time because this is such a different and more coordinated and collaborative way of doing business. And in local governments, you all know, you're just capacity constrained. So if you view it as more, it's going to be complicated. But if it's solving your problems together efficiently, that's kind of what this shared system is going to provide them.
I like that. I think the capacity is one of our biggest challenges. We just pulled a new natural resource program out of, well, it's still under our community planning and economic development department, but is its own thing and is a party of one person right now. And it's exciting that we're building this thing. And so our conservation programming in part lives, you know, under the umbrella of that work. So we're operating in a little bit of a reverse where we're kind of becoming more siloed as we're building programs. And we're trying not to lose, you know, the connection that we have between the work, but that's also, you know, one FTE. And then our entire parks department is, you know, part of our public works department, which has its own campus and a completely, you know, different physical location. So in terms of that cross-pollination of communication and information, I made a note about that idea of, you know, using language that frames this as efficiency and solving of problems as opposed to adding more, which we all know, but it's good to hear it framed that way.
I've also heard a couple of anecdotes that Kitsap County staff have shared when, you know, both super long range planning and responding to like permits on the horizon. The mapping itself and where the current levels of service are, and then where their desired levels of service are, and then where the gaps are. It's giving them more context in which to say, you know, this is important for this particular reason. And I'm just making this up, like 3 bridges over this river is going to decrease the level of service. Is there something else that we can do? So it's more of a way of, you know, bringing some specific examples, like let's find out a better way versus the county, you know, supporting 3 bridges and then falling further behind, you know, in one part of government. But they are trying to figure out like, what does that look like? Because time marches on in terms of permitting. They also decided, you know, something we didn't really talk about a ton in the presentation. They also decided not to make this, or to make this not regulatory, if that makes any sense. So it's basically like, let's figure out how this works and figure out the accounting method before we go into a regulatory, you must do X. Because, and I think in doing so, they're figuring out their own internal systems. And that might be something that they go to in the future, but there's a ton you can do outside of a regulatory framework.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, other questions about Kitsap, or maybe specific things happening within your 2 counties?
I guess from a communications perspective, what has the interface with your community looked like in terms of the work?
Marla, do you want to start that? You're a very important part of the community.
I'm not sure. Like, so we have these workshops, and more and more of my coworkers begin to attend these workshops, and they get really excited about the potential that they have, like how they can use this information, and then they of course go talk to somebody else. So I'd say maybe word of mouth is really a good way for at least the tribe to do their outreach and kind of spread the word slowly. And who knows who all of my coworkers go out and talk to. I've got like a habitat bio, and I've got 2 scientists that are in water resources, water quality, climate change. And then Chloe Donaldson, and she talks to all sorts of different people and programs. So that's a nice spreading of the word right there. We have an outreach coordinator, and sometimes he will send some things out on Facebook for the tribe, or we'll put some flyers around about what we're doing and how we're doing it and how we're helping tribe with their natural resources. So just from this perspective, those are kind of some of the things we do.
And I'll add in the original funding for this work came through a national philanthropic group that we got a grant for to do the support that covered our time and Ross Strategic, and then Suquamish Tribe and Port Gamble-Scullum Tribe at that point, their natural resources staff, and then the Kitsap County staff, that was part of their day jobs basically. And one of our early tasks was going to be a community survey, like which services are most important to you. We had a whole task around that, and then COVID. So in 2020, we had basically spec'd out like 4 different workshops. We're going to go here, we're going to get the community here, and none of that could happen.
Timing.
Yeah, exactly. So we ended up, in lieu of that, because we did have a grant deliverable, we could survey our own members and do that. And also because this came from partly funded by federal sources, there's a bunch of federal rules that you cannot use them for, you know, public surveys. And I don't know if it's like human subjects review or what exactly it is, but it's the strange like 3rd rail issue for federal funding. So we had philanthropic funding. We went to our
And and so I think just having that conversation with those two totally different people, good. So I'm glad to hear that you came for this purpose. It's good. Hi, Mindy.
Hi, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I thought I had switched to my hotspot, but apparently not earlier. So yeah, just getting the good spot. So thanks for filling in, Marla. Where do you want to go next?
Saying that you had all these workshops and you were ready to do all these outreach opportunities, and then COVID hit, and then you had to switch to something.
So then we ended up, we have a membership within our own organization. So we were able to reach out to our own members and basically get them to fill out information. So there's a whole bunch of folks who live in Kitsap County, but they're people that we're affiliated with. So it wasn't like a strong, set of people throughout all of Kitsap County. So that was one challenge that we had to overcome. All right. And I see there's a process that's bogging down my computer now. It's no end of tech issues.
How much time do we have scheduled for these? I know we've got
12 more minutes. So
people
yeah,
to
if you
move
want to
between
hop into
meetings.
any other rooms, you are more than welcome to. And we can keep going. I mean, we're here to answer your questions.
I might migrate over to the comp plan and capital planning room because we're also right in the throes of updating our comp plan. And honestly, I think I don't know if we're naming this particular work as part of that language. I think we kind of work our way around it, in a lot of what we've produced. So yeah, I appreciate you all.
Nice to meet you, Laura.
Yeah, you too.
Great. And Rebecca, if there's any other group you want to go to, you're more than welcome to. We can also keep chatting.
Yeah, I mean, I think she just said we had 5 minutes left. So I guess staying in here makes the most sense for me at this point. Yeah, so there is one engineer that is very responsive and that is hopeful that I work with. But here on the Olympic Peninsula, we have a lot of NGOs that do a lot of the fish passage, fish barrier removal stuff. Our roads department does very little, very, very little of that. And mainly because I think we have such a robust NGO community that does that in the West End and here. And the tribes do a lot of that. But one thing that we're struggling with is getting them put on the 6-year tip. And so this is kind of all new to me here. So I'm trying to learn it all too in the last couple of years. And so when I ask Public Works about the tip being put, it's like, because that was the problem last year. They're like, well, we didn't get this project from this entity. It's not going on the tip. And it's like, well, where did you post that it was getting that time of year? If you have a project, this is what we need from it by this date to be included or looked at on the tip. And it's just like, well, same time every year. Well, okay, it's the same time every year, but it would be great if there was like something on the website, maybe an email, or because a lot of our NGOs have turnover. And so that kind of stuff falls through the cracks. And I felt like I was like, well, so did you put anything out there? Did I just miss it? And he's just like, same time every year. And it's too late to put anything on the tip because we're already, and I'm like, And I know that our lead entity, because our lead entities like, what? Like, they're not even hearing about it. And so it's just very hard. And now it's like going into through the public process. And it's like, well, if you want to add something, you got to come bring it into the public process. And it's like, but they're doing that for us and saving the county money. So we don't have, the county doesn't have to do it. Well, why are we throwing these roadblocks up? I just think there's a lot of, this is how we do it. A lot of like, change is hard for folks and it's slow. And it's like, okay, well, can we please get a something so we know when to do this next year and not just see it go in front of the, you know, commissioners, the draft? It's like, wait a minute. Like and so it's really hard when I get those kind of responses like, oh, it's too late, it's not going on there. And it's like, but they have funding.
Right.
And we were, it's really hard.
Well, the good news is that this is part of the comp plan too. So you have a transportation improvement program that's a 20-year program that's tied up with the comprehensive plan timeline. And so you can grab a lot of those projects and put them into the 20-year, and the TIP has to follow that. So there's a connection between the 6-year program and the 20-year program that goes in the comprehensive plan.
See,
So
see, this is my lack of being a planner. I don't know this stuff. It's like, I'm a habitat biologist. It's like, wait a minute, and I'm trying to navigate this. But okay, so there's the 6-year and the 20-year.
There's a 6-year and a 20-year improvement program for transportation. And so they do need to have a lot of those things lined up on their 20-year program, and their 6-year pulls off of that, and also everything else that comes along. So that might be a longer term way to kind of work him into your planning process timeline and your level of service.
Okay. And do you guys work with a lot of NGOs doing a lot of culvert repairs and fish passage and barrier removals? And
a couple, yeah. We've even helped kind of fill out a grant for someone over in Jefferson County. We helped them with a grant application for culvert removal, and we've got a couple on this side too, and we hope to do more, expand more, because I'm a planner doing biologist stuff. And so
you two should team up.
Yeah, I mean,
clearly. Yeah. Well, and I mean, still figuring out, it's just layers. So figuring out, okay, what was the deadline you just missed? Because we did that within our project too. And now we're trying to queue it up in enough time that it can be considered. So, okay, we got 15 seconds to go.
I thank you so much for the help and the thoughts. Yeah, that was great.
Good luck.
All right. See you on the other side.
All right. So I guess I'll introduce our group here. This is the from plans to practice, implementation, monitoring, and adaptive management breakout room, where we talk all things about how to, actually use this on the ground, how to strategize and implement strategies to protect and restore ecological functions, and how to use this program to help do that. I guess I'll open it up first for questions or any topics anyone wants to throw out there to start. And if we don't have any starters, I guess I could start by asking the question of all of you. Does anyone foresee how they might use a program like this in implementing current plans that they work with, current plans, current strategies, or current actions? Do you see this type of work being helpful in your jurisdiction or in your agency? Or
I could start with one one thing, Brittany, and that's fish passage. We know that regionally it's important that we sort of have a more or less agreed to set of priorities where fish passage should be addressed. And so we're just developing that now. And I think developing that prioritization is also going to help more directly with salmon recovery. And I'm thinking through like the lead entity process in West Sound. So again, it's sort of an alignment of fish passage is one of the metrics within the stream asset, and it also helps us achieve move forward with salmon recovery.
Yeah. Mark, I'm going to call on Mark, and I'm also going to screen share some of our maps. That also might be helpful in the discussion. Mark.
I had to find the right button to push to speak. I stalled because I had a couple of issues that I was going to think about raising. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mark Mobbs. I'm an environmental scientist with the Quinault Indian Nation out on the coast. So one of the first observations is that we have very different conditions than you have on Kitsap Peninsula. And so we tend to focus on our little world, at the silo we're in. And I just wanted to let us know, to expand a bit. Previously, I worked in the Columbia River, so I have a little bit of background on slightly larger systems. But anyway, I wanted to tag on to Steve's comment about fish passage. And I wanted to simply point out that our current approach in fish passage largely is focused on culverts. There are some bridges that impair fish passage, and we do definitely need to identify and correct them. I know of one other fish passage issue that's unique to your country, not mine, and that's the Hood Canal Bridge, where it's actually delaying outmigrant smolts to the point where they're being consumed by marine mammals. So I wanted to basically broaden and encourage everybody to broaden, because I clearly have a lot to learn. But anyway, I was going to mention that the current focus on culverts tends to focus the attention on primarily coho and chum. And these are very important in Kitsap County, and I will not discount fish passage as an important issue, or culvert repair as an important issue.
The Yankees.
Pardon me?
Oh, I think someone is muted, Mark. I think you can continue, and I'll mute people.
Okay. It tends to focus on coho, chum, and maybe pink. I don't have pink salmon out here, so I don't know them as well. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but at the same time, often our most imperiled species are main stem and large stream system spawners, such as Chinook and steelhead. And we need to be cautious that we're not putting all of our effort into a coho and chum system if we also have impaired Chinook and steelhead. I'm heavily involved in the Chehalis system. We could fix every barrier culvert in that river and have no measurable benefit to Chinook or spring Chinook primarily. That's one of our major focuses. I just wanted to point that out, that to take into account the other issues and not overly narrow your approach. I don't think you have as much risk to that in the Kitsap Peninsula as I do, but we do have a lot of Chinook, and they're not doing well. I should say we used to have a lot of Chinook, and they're not doing well. And steelhead are declining all over their range, so we do definitely need to be looking at them as well. I had another thought, but it disappeared, so I will disappear now, and if it comes up, I'll raise my hand again.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, for that perspective. I think that's helpful. Are you guys able to see my map here on my screen? Okay. I guess on the topic of fish passage, I thought I could maybe just share a little bit of detail on this map here. So this is our stream asset map, and you can kind of see by the colored designations that some are having a higher level. Some of these units are having a higher level of service than others, and again, that's based on water quality and riparian vegetation and fish passage. And so one thing that's been interesting about fish passage is that if you've worked with fish passage prioritization, you know there's a whole lot of different ways to prioritize a culvert or a bridge or whatever for a fish passage barrier for replacement. A lot of different ways you can score something, and a lot of different aspects you can look at. One thing that's kind of interesting about KNRAMP, we've played around a little bit with using it for fish passage prioritization. And what's interesting about it is that if I zoom in on a unit, so we'll do this unit here on Long Lake, and if I click on this management unit, which is a pretty big unit, so I might need to zoom out a little bit. I can see that, so it's got an orange, so like a low level of service for the stream unit. And I can see each attribute and how that is contributing to the overall level of service score for that stream unit. And so our BI score is low. So that's kind of an indicator of water quality and method community. Our E. coli water quality rating is medium. And our fish passage score is very low, meaning we have a certain number of total barriers within the management unit. And so, you know, that can help us kind of qualitatively make some decisions around fish passage. Like, okay, we know that fish passage is kind of disproportionately bringing down the level of service score of this unit, along with BI. Might also tell us that, oh, maybe we need to help get our BI score up as well. So if we're going to improve fish passage here, the fish have something to eat. So we've been able to look at some areas like, oh, water quality is really low there. You know, we definitely need to put in an effort into improving water quality if we're also going to be focusing on fish passage in that area. We don't want to get fish up there and not focus on water quality, but we have other areas where we have wonderful water quality, wonderful riparian, and fish passage score is really bringing down the level of service of the management unit. And you know, we can tell from this that if we corrected fish passage, we'd be getting fish up to some really nice habitat with some good riparian and some good water quality. So it's a little bit of a different approach if you use this for fish passage. And if you don't, and you use a traditional fish passage prioritization method, you could at least use this to kind of qualitatively supplement your prioritization process, I think. Mark, did you have something to add?
Something to add, and I remembered my earlier thought. First, I want to compliment you on considering issues beyond simply providing fish passage. For a lot of you already know that with the fairly recent discovery of 6-ppd-quinone and its detrimental toxic effect on coho, it was first observed when some fish passage was reestablished and some fish moved into a stream that they had not been in for decades, and they had pre-spawning adult mortality in those streams. So unknowingly, they had put them into a toxic environment without even knowing it. So real congratulations on you looking beyond the simple fix the culvert. The other issue that I had, and this is a question for the group that can be separated from what we're doing right now and done later, but I'm working on a very large system that we have 5 or 6 counties connected, and they have very different priorities. We have a county that's currently permitting new construction in the floodplain. I think we may have 2 that would easily, that would permit new construction in a floodplain. We have others that would not. And I'm wondering how you get that cross-jurisdictional cooperation when you have some very clear differences in priorities between those jurisdictions. I don't have an answer. I'm hoping to find one. But anyway, I thought I'd raise that, and we can discuss it later if we have the time and some thoughts.
Thanks. And I'll echo that. And we're collaborating a bit with like Pierce County, but we also collaborate with Pierce County and Mason County in other ways as well. But another thing that I'll echo with that is sometimes even just getting priorities kind of on the same page across county departments. We have many different priorities that we, need to incorporate across even just our county departments. And so this helps a bit to bring natural resources in to those conversations about other county priorities, and also kind of speaking the same language of asset management with some of our built asset managers has been really helpful. Like, okay, we got to consider this stormwater asset, or we got to consider this bridge asset. Okay, and by the way, according to our comprehensive plan, the stream is also a county asset that needs to be considered in this decision making, and how are we considering that when we make these decisions. So it's been helpful internally so far, and I think that as we branch out to other jurisdictions and continuing to collaborate, it will be helpful there as well. But I don't want to be the only one talking, so I'm curious what other people think.
I'll just second what Brittany said. As another county department within Kitsap County, having access to this data, and especially being able to link KNRAMP to our county-wide comprehensive plan and our parks pros plan, and kind of linking this level of service and the way that we talk about these assets to those priorities and goals is helpful, because sometimes we will have maybe a commissioner or a constituent that wants to know why we're spending so much money on this. Is where this aligns with our countywide approved policies and plans and priorities, and be able to really demonstrate how it's going to be helping increase that level of service. It's a really great communication tool.
One thing I'd love to touch on from an implementation perspective, and Mark kind of mentioned permitting in the floodplain. One thing that, and I also saw a message in the chat that I didn't get time to respond to yet, regarding using this as a regulatory tool. That was something we discussed many times with the core team, kind of played around with. Could we use this information to make permitting decisions, or to enforce regulations? In theory, yes. In theory, we could go into Cartograph. We could kind of model, what would happen if we cleared this forest? How would that affect the level of service? Or what would happen if we paved this? We can kind of try to model some different scenarios using this. There's a lot of variables that come into play when we attempt to do that. At this point, we decided with the core team not to use this in a regulatory manner. It's not really intended, or the data isn't really on the scale to be used at the parcel level, even though theoretically we could. It's not really at that scale. It's more of a larger scale tool. And so it can tell us some things about certain parcels, or maybe help us target certain parcels for protection or restoration. But trying to use it in a regulatory way at this time didn't really make sense for us. Also, we would want it to go through a more robust public process before we used it in that way, and also have it stand the test of time. Right now, we feel that it needs some time to be implemented, to be refined. We know that we could use some better data on some things. And so potentially long-term, it might be able to be used that way. And certainly in other jurisdictions, if you're thinking about doing this type of work, if you want it to be used in that way, I would recommend that you do so, but also be very conscientious of the scale, of the data that you have, and making sure you have the right data at the right scale, and also really going out for that robust public process, and formal adoption and everything, so that it can stand up in an appeal or anything like that. So that's where we landed with the regulatory side. I'm not saying no forever, but for right now, we're not using it in that way. And if we did, we would we'd go out for a more formal public process. Any other questions or comments about implementation or anything I'm curious if any other jurisdictions or groups are doing similar work.
Hey, Brittany, Grant here from City of Tumwater. Nice work, by the way. My question is in regards to some of the smaller cities within your county. Are you meeting with them, and are they looking to adapt this data into their planning efforts? And I don't know, can you elaborate a little bit more about what kind of conversations are taking place and what the cultural hurdles might be?
Yeah, we haven't had quite as much engagement from the small cities. Some of them have been going through staff turnover throughout this process. So we had certain people we were talking to who then left. So we definitely do need to re-engage our cities. We do engage with our cities quite a bit through our SAM recovery lead entity. And so there is some awareness there. Like Rachel Bowen's on the call, and she's on our Whisper West Sound lead entity, and I'm sure has at least heard about this program through there. Certainly we have the data available for the cities and would be happy to share it with them and kind of give them our takeaways. Haven't thought too much about what we might provide them, and so I like the suggestion. We should definitely get some feedback from Rachel and City of Bremerton. I know Bainbridge has had expressed interest too. And maybe we could provide them with kind of a shortened kind of annual assessment or something that might be useful to them. So I definitely think we should explore that more and engage with them more. So I like that suggestion.
Yeah, and for us at the City of Tumwater, this really ties into our stormwater planning initiatives as well as our sustainability initiatives. And one of the challenges we face is, obviously GMA and its relationship to critical areas within, those planning blocks. And so I think for local or smaller cities, and I can only speak to what my experiences are at the City of Tumwater, that those are the biggest challenges. As you look at the MPDES permit requirements, especially in the latest updates, projects like mapping your environmental assets as they relate to potential treatment, which there is a strong correlation to wetlands, especially based on the wetland rating system. There's a specific call out for stormwater pollution values. This is an area that kind of hasn't really been flexed in the world of environmental stewardship and asset management, and as it relates to planning and even enforcement. So there's definitely, I think, a lot of potential. I just don't know how to tackle it. It's just such a big lift for the planning departments and even engineers to consider as they review projects coming through. So anyway, it's a challenge, but definitely a direction we need to head.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I guess one thing that as I share the maps, you can see, obviously, as you would expect, a lot of our lower level of service for things like forests, as well as like shoreline armoring, are obviously lower around the West Sound, and in the cities, as well as our unincorporated urban growth area of Silverdale, East Bremerton, etc. And we will need to partner with the cities when we try to implement actions to elevate those levels of service. And then one thing I'll just add that ties into GMA, and then I'll go to Lisa. Sorry, Lisa, is that our desired level of service of high for each management unit and each asset exists for shorelines and streams. But for forests, we recognized that we would probably not be able to achieve a desired level of service of high in the urban growth areas and the cities while still meeting GMA required densities. And so that goal is actually across the watershed, like the stream watershed, not the whole Riot 15 watershed, but like the creek watershed. So the idea being that where we have watersheds that drain to Puget Sound and have very urbanized areas kind of in the lower watershed, we would want to compensate for low forest scores in the UGAs outside the UGAs. And so we'll have to have a focus on improving our forest level of service score outside our UGAs, knowing that we're probably not going to achieve high forest level of service in the UGAs and meet densities. Lisa?
Yeah, I was thinking something similar that Grant touched on here a little bit. One of the uses I see this being able to be used for is, submitting comments on permit applications for those planners. It may not be a stand up in court kind of data at this point, but it definitely could be used as, look at this shoreline. It's already, seriously impacted. So no, a variance is not acceptable in this area. Or, look, this stream is heavily impacted, has really low water quality. So no, you can't cut that forest down. I just see it as a tool. So if you want to submit a comment for a permit application, you would have a little bit of, data backing you up. Like, look what this shows. Cumulative effects are already a problem. So let's not grant them a variance. And, they don't necessarily have to take your comment letter to heart, but it helps if you comment and if you have some kind of data to back you up to support that comment. So I see a usefulness for this tool in that way. Thanks.
Yeah, and the more that it gets used in that way, the more we can continually pull out any issues with that, or any issues with the data or whatever, that to improve it so it can be used better. So yeah, I think folks should feel free to use it that way, and we'll consider it at the county. Absolutely consider it. Grant?
Yeah, just a slightly different concept. We're looking at these environmental assets and are applying a lower value based on urban density. And I get that. But I'm going to kind of take you back to wetlands, because that's where I cut my teeth a lot. So wetlands have a higher value in urban centers based on their potential to treat. And so I'd love for us to consider looking at wetland assets with respect to function, and create a system for that, because I think that's where you're going to really hit it where it counts. So that's just a thought.
Yeah, we do have a goal to include wetlands as an asset in the future. We don't currently have a comprehensive wetland map, so we couldn't really pull them in at this time, but we're actually working on the wetland intrinsic potential model to improve our wetland maps. And then we're going to start looking at how we could add them in as an asset. And you're right, like some assets have a higher value in an urban area, and some have, maybe a higher value in a more rural area. But with the core team, it was very adamant that streams and shorelines, fish are swimming through an urban area. There would be no reason that we would want a stream to have our streams do have lower level of service in the urban areas, but we would not want to accept a standard of a stream having a lower level of service in an urban area than in a rural area, because fish have to swim through, an urban area just like a rural area, and same with marine shorelines. The forest one was the only asset where we decided that it is a priority to continue focusing development in the UGAs, and the forest assets kind of go way beyond riparian areas. They go way beyond wetlands, the way the forest management units are. And so if we tried to achieve a high level of service in every forest management unit in the UGAs, there would really be a struggle to keep urban densities, and we wanted, that was a priority for our core team to, you know, continue implementing GMA and urban densities in the urban areas. Mark?
First, an apology for dominating, but this hopefully will get away from my constant interruptions. I guess my question or a request is, and what I'm finding the workshop useful, at the same time I'm finding the ability to implement something like this. And of course, I'm in no position to do it. I'm technical staff. I'm just a fish biologist. But anyway, I'm wondering if it would be possible to create some kind of a step-by-step guidance on implementing this kind of a process into a multi-jurisdictional area. What are the initial steps one needs to do? What is the initial data one would want to be collecting, etc.? And I realize, you know, this is going to be more at the planner stage than at the fish biologist stage. But anyway, a step-by-step set of instructions on how to do this, I think, could be useful. And I thought I would suggest that.
Thanks. Yeah, we've been doing our best to like document our process so that it can be kind of a model for other jurisdictions. So we're happy to share what we have, and then also noting that every jurisdiction will vary a little bit depending on what their priorities are, what their geography is, and what data sources they have available to them. For example, if you have a great wetland inventory, I would highly encourage your jurisdiction to include wetlands as an asset. And then, you know, maybe when we get our wetland maps going, we can learn from you, oh, what attributes did you use to rate your, you know, to develop level of service for your wetlands? And so we can learn from each other too, as more jurisdictions start doing this, and then we can improve that cross-jurisdictional collaboration. But I would encourage jurisdictions to just start. You know, that was a thing here. Like, there were a lot of things that were not perfect. There's a lot of things that are still not perfect, but it's something, and something is easier to work from than nothing. And now we can adaptively manage it and make it better. Looks like we have about 20 seconds left. So any last thoughts? Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Brittany. This was a huge lift. I only came into the county at like the 80% spot, and so I'm really impressed with it.
Thank you.
So we're looking for ways to perhaps manage our own assets as well as support the work Kitsap County is doing, especially for resources in our UNA, which tends to be the western shores of Kitsap.
They were defined that. All right. So I hear a lot of background noise from. If you're not speaking, please mute yourself. Thank you. All right. So welcome everybody. This is the Aligning with County Planning, Integrating KNRAMP into Comprehensive Plan and Capital Plans breakout group. So we have about 30 minutes to answer any questions that you may have for the county team. Jim, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I'm the long range planner for Kitsap County, and so had a pretty significant part, I guess, in making sure that this program got implemented into our 2024 comprehensive plan and our capital facilities plans, and primarily for use as a tool for our other programs to use in their planning for their assets. For example, when roads looks at their 6-year tip, they use all different kinds of county resources to help them decide where to spend their money, because they have a limited amount of money to spend, as you probably know, and so they want to get the biggest bang for their buck. So they look at where they can make environmental improvements that will have the biggest bang for the buck. And so they might look at different culverts and look at the levels of service that we have on our streams, and maybe our program would help them give better weight or more weight to a particular culvert if it's going to do more good for salmon upstream, things like that. So that's just one example, but anybody have any questions about how we might have integrated it or how others might be using our program? Again, it's really early in the process. This is our first year. It's been a long process, about 8 years putting this together, because this program is basically a first in the nation, and I don't think there's anything like it yet. And so we're spending a lot of time trying to get this right and making sure all the right players are in place to help develop this program. And this will be our first year, our first test with our first 3 assets. Again, it's streams, forests, and shorelines. So we hope later on to add things like ag lands or wetlands. We're not sure what other assets we might add going forward, but here's where we're starting to build our program from.
Thanks for sharing, Jim. And hi, Kirby. Met you on the 160th Purdy project, so thanks for help on that. Great presentation, and this is an awesome program. I was at the Sailor Sea when you guys presented this, and it's great to see it still growing. The biggest question that I have is we are developing a plan that involves multiple divisions and even departments, and the tools you use to not just extract information from existing plans and programs of other divisions, but also what exactly like the nuts and bolts of how you guys got buy-in or support or participation from groups that may have not had this kind of idea introduced to them. So for instance, like your roads planning, I'm sure was not exactly asset management looking at non-environment or looking at non-built environment stuff. And so far, the tools that we plan to use are using like mural boards and specific like breakout rooms and like specific meetings with staff. But if there's other things or items you guys use, it'd be great to hear from, because it seems like it's integrating throughout the whole county, and that's a big step that we want to do as well.
Yeah, well, building off of our roads discussion with them, with the roads department, they have, as part of their tip process, they score and rank projects. They, like I said, they get numerous projects coming in, and they only have a certain amount of dollars to spend on road projects, and so they want to get the biggest bang for their buck. And so they have a bunch of different criteria that they look at every project under. And environmental improvement was one of those. And so this was a really good natural fit for us to slip into that slot as environmental improvement options. And the more, I guess, the more things that a project can improve on, the higher it ranks in scoring. And so the better chances it is of getting funding. So we don't have to have our own funding in order to get projects done. We can rely on public works. We can rely on road dollars for some of these things, stormwater dollars for other projects and things like that. So it's a program that makes sure that all of the county's programs are on the same page, moving towards environmental improvement. If that helps.
Thanks, Jim. I'll add something to that, Sean, and you do make a great point that it's really hard for asset managers that deal mostly with built assets, the built environment, to think outside of that, their scope. And so it is quite that shift in planning paradigm. It is you can say it's a change in their culture, in the culture. And one thing that we knew for sure is that if we write this and institutionalize it in our comprehensive plan, which is kind of that high level directive to all the county operations, we can point to it and say, hey, this is something that our Board of County Commissioners and community agreed to include in here, and it's been adopted. So it really kind of gives us that, backstop. Look at that. We have direction. We have directives. We also, at the early stages, the different county, as we were developing the program in 2018, we were just trying to figure out, is this being done anywhere else in the nation? Like, who's doing this? Are there examples out there that we can look at? there we found one town in Canada, town of Gibson, that was kind of applying this concept, but to a very specific asset. They were looking at their watershed and their water supply. It was at the first couple of years, we didn't really include or involve a lot of the build asset managers from the county, the different departments, other than stormwater, because they were the main managers and kind of people that used, or public works generally used Cartograph, which is the tool that they use for their asset management work. So we wanted to make sure that we talk to them, bring them to the table, talk to them, talk about what language they use, kind of understand that, and try and use the same systems that they were using. That's why we ended up using Cartograph, so that we, once we start, they can open their Cartograph application and turn on all the natural resource assets and see, all right, if we do this, well, this is what I'm picturing. If we do this project, where is it, how does it land in the natural resource asset management kind of framework, and how does it change the level of service? And so those were kind of the steps that we took earlier to try and bring them to the table, to try and speak the same language, to try and work together. But again, I do recognize and acknowledge that it's hard. It was a hard shift, and we still, in those conversations when we're in the transportation improvement program meetings and we bring up natural assets, it's like, well, we're talking about roads, we're talking about safety, we're talking about how many cars use this road. Is it really worth millions of dollars to to upgrade the culvert? So yeah, thanks for the great question.
Yeah, and I would add to that when you said using the same language as Public Works, that's one reason we chose the level of service terminology and grading things on an A through F. Because most of our Public Works asset management systems use that same thing. So, we're talking their language, and so that helps. Don, I think you had a question.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm not sure if this is the right group for this, but so I'm the legislative director for the Puget Sound Partnership, and I've been, for the past several years, working with a variety of legislators to talk through options for improving growth, like the state level land use plans, and guiding local governments and how to better incorporate Puget Sound and salmon recovery into the overall state framework for land use. And one of the ideas that we've talked about is kind of stems from the work that you're all doing here, and basically doing something like requiring that capital facilities plans include natural assets, and acknowledging that this is an emerging field. Like, just pick one or two to start with. Here's a couple of examples using Kitsap as a guide. I'm curious if, I guess a couple of questions. Like, one, is the capital facilities plan the primary connection to your comprehensive plan with the work that you're doing here, would be one question. Another question is, do you feel like there was anything that prevented you, with the way that the state and the state laws currently think about land use planning, was there anything that prevented you from making the connections that you all wanted to make that needs to be addressed in state law? And then third, like, would there be any sort of like major concerns or red flags with starting to require all local governments to kind of start thinking about these kinds of things, at least?
The loaded question, Don.
Kirby, you want to jump in on that one first?
Yeah, I got to think about this a little bit. I think one thing that comes to mind when I think about kind of the barriers, and Jim, you can touch on like the capital facilities, but I don't think that that's the only kind of main connection. There are so many different planning processes that are happening at the county level, whether it's stormwater, capital facilities improvement, transportation, parks planning, watershed planning, all of those. And we don't want to like, say this is how we're going to be planning. Our intention was to incorporate this new idea into the different planning processes that the county was already doing. We don't want to like laid on top of it. We wanted to integrate it. So it's part of your decision-making process. It's part of your planning. One challenge that I know, like throughout the development, and now we're starting to implement this, is our land use regulations are very concrete. They're very solid. I remember that early on we had, our buildable lands analysis. When we try and identify areas that are appropriate for development, where we need to cite urban growth areas, where we need to be focusing growth, it was, yes, we do take into consideration critical areas, but we don't really think about the future. We don't really, kind of think about the big picture. We just look at our critical areas map. We say there's a stream here. This is the buffer. What are the variances that we can, use to make sure that we allow or the number of housing and population growth that's required for this area. Another challenge was around kind of variances. So when we look at areas that, or not variances, or what's the word? Like you applied for a permit, maybe like a large plat 20 years ago when our regulations were not as progressive as they were today. Those were vested. And so now that we have new information and new guidelines and it's hard to say, well, this area, we really should not be developing like 500 single family homes here because it's the headwaters of a critical salmon stream. But we really can't go back and because that permit has been approved and vested, it's kind of impossible to go back in unless we go in and purchase all those development rights. And so those are kind of the big challenges that I'm seeing. Albeit, Kitsap County is a really great area where we have a lot of growth happening, but we also have a lot of intact habitat that we have a lot of opportunity to protect and continue to kind of develop our landscape responsibly. And so I'm hoping for the best and that this can really guide future development in the right direction. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I think that capital facilities was kind of an easy matchup and an easy fit for us, but it's not the only reason for this project. We wanted to improve the environment and plan for it in the future, and so that we don't degrade everything before we, as we grow. And so, I don't know when you say, on a statewide basis or something, or a regional basis, doing something like this, it's very data intensive, but with this, after we get it up and running, hopefully it'll be kind of a plug and play system that anybody can use. That's the whole idea behind it. What is it? Not ecology, but WDFW, one of their criteria for this grant was that we make it as easy to plug and play for another county as possible. And so that's why we're trying to make it simple, straightforward, not overly complicated. It can be done with a cartograph, where you can use your own GIS system to do this kind of work. It's just a matter of sharing that with your other departments so that they can use the information as well. And just because we're starting out with, not having our own money for projects doesn't mean we won't have our own money for projects in this program at some future date. Right now, we're relying on our capital facilities and other programs. Maybe it's outside agencies. We'll be looking for grants to advance projects. But at some point, I can imagine that Kitsap County might start allocating some money to this as its own program and making its own improvements. So we're hopeful.
I know you had 3 questions. I'm hoping that we covered most of them, Don, but if not, you can.
Yeah, I think so. So just to summarize, so it sounds like you all at the county kind of see KNRAMP as being its own standalone program, and then there was work with each of the county planning departments, or that with each of the elements of the comprehensive plan to figure out like what does KNRAMP and what we're trying to do here mean for this element of the comprehensive plan. And it was kind of like
Yeah.
Tracked and incorporated in some way into each of the different elements. Okay, yeah, that's helpful. That answers my question.
Yeah, and even land use, like Kirby alluded to, when we're going through our comprehensive plan updates and looking at maybe expanding UGAs. One thing we haven't done yet in this program is come up with different levels of service for urban versus rural. And so that's something we've been wrestling with and something we may end up doing in the future, but we haven't done that quite yet. So that this program may help justify expanding UGAs or justify not expanding UGAs in particular areas.
Yeah, any other questions? I think one thing that I also want to add and got me really excited about KNRAMP is I've been working in kind of natural resources here at Kitsap County for over 10 years. And I've been working like in specific programs like salmon recovery, Puget Sound ecosystem recovery work, shore-friendly Kitsap. And every time and many of you may know that our like salmon recovery work, Puget Sound ecosystem recovery work are really split into these different geographies that don't incorporate like the entire county. And so when our commissioner's office or when like conservation futures coordinators contact me and they're like, hey, what is the highest priority watershed in the county that we need to focus on when distributing conservation futures money? And I turn around and I say, here are 26 plans that we have, different watershed plans and different salmon recovery plans that really identify all the priority areas that we need to focus on. It was really hard for me to say, hey, you know, for the entire county, here are the areas with really low levels of service for forest cover. Here are the areas that really need stream or watershed water quality improvement. And so this, in a way, will really help our natural resources team to really, you know, look at the entire picture for the county, Kitsap County overall, that's split into so many different, you know, so many smaller watersheds into like 2.5 LIOs, 2 salmon recovery areas, a lot of, you know, and, you know, we have our entire shoreline jurisdiction, but it's one tool that will help us in that way and looking at, you know, the county as a whole and understanding kind of the levels of service for our different assets.
Yeah, and just like we couldn't prioritize our watersheds, we also couldn't prioritize our culverts for replacement for fish passage. And so when someone would come to us and say, what's your highest priority culvert? We're like, I'm not really sure. Let's look at some of the higher level streams and pick one of those. Now we have a good program to you know, justify which ones we're ranking higher. So that helps.
Does help. That's a lot of the questions we get. Council members saying, hey, what's the highest? And it's like, well, that's a very subjective question.
Yeah.
How do we do that equitably? That's the question, is how do you equitably distribute that? So that does help.
Yeah, it does help take a lot of that subjectivity out of it. And that helps to sell it. It really does.
And when you guys were starting to implement this and starting to spread it across Kitsap County, like Public Works, were you finding it helpful to share like existing plans or just give summaries of existing plans? Or did you guys kind of just only work in their language? Like you said, you used the certain asset management software because that's what they were familiar with. Would you introduce new concepts or would you kind of steer the conversation still towards like what they were familiar with? That's a hard question, I know, but just curious.
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
Go ahead, Jim.
No, so they you know, we spoke mostly the same language, you know, because we're all in the same county and very familiar with what each other does. But we did introduce a few new things like desired level of service, whereas in the capital facilities, it would be like a level of service standard. So it's a little bit difference there, and a standard is adopted by the county, whereas a desired level of service is not adopted just yet. So we may transition to an adopted standard. We don't know yet. Like I said, we're still in like kind of the first year of implementing this thing. So we'll see where that goes. And we only did just start out with 2 watersheds as a test case. And so we're building on those right now. There are two of our biggest watersheds. And, that's where we're started with most of the detail and the reporting. And we're just building off of that. This is the first year, so we'll see what's not working by the end of the year, and hopefully next year we can make some improvements if needed.
One thing that I'll add to that is, like, this last year when we were participating in the I don't know if it's the TIP process or Transmission Improvement Program or the Stormwater Assessment or Capital Facilities Program, which is updated every year. Like every year they solicit projects, like what are the important things that we need to include in our 6-year plan. And I remember through the KNRAMP team, we got together and we had looked at the levels of service for the different watersheds and management units across the county. And then we overlaid kind of, here are the important salmon streams that we know, salmon watersheds, and here are the important, we started overlaying different things on there to really kind of hone in on, all right, I think this is the watershed that really need to focus on, and then focus into like the management units where work is really needed. And then we shared that information with the different like public works groups. And it's still hard because they're talking at the project level, and we're still kind of at this higher kind of management unit level. So I think there's that gap that we need to kind of really meet them halfway. And I'm hoping that with this new kind of, we're going to be hoping to roll it out, or the plan is to roll it out by December of this year, our state of watershed, state of natural resource assets for the county, to really show like, here are the levels of service across the county. Here are the areas where restoration or protection need to take place, and here are some opportunities to really improve like low levels of service to meet our desired levels of service, or and then here are the partnerships that we need to maybe develop in order to move these projects forward. Or so that's another step that I'm hoping will get us to where we want to be. Any other questions or comments? Or, this is for those that are just joining, this is the integrating KNRAMP into comprehensive planning and county planning processes group.
So we have a couple of other counties here I see represented. Can you imagine a program like this working in your county, and what might be some of the biggest obstacles to that, do you think?
Counties or cities? I see.
Yeah, there are always obstacles. Maybe we can help share how we've worked through them. Or any other questions? If not, we have about 5 minutes left, I think, in our Q&A. So if anybody wants to jump to another section and see what's going on there, feel free. I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Sorry.
There you go.
When I first heard about this, and you're identifying these as assets, normally I think about assets are under the control of the asset manager, but these assets are not under the control of you all, because they're, on who is the property owner or the adjacent property owner. And so I wonder, and you talked about that you don't also have any dedicated funding right now to do projects to improve these assets. So how do you kind of bridge that problem? Like normally an asset has an asset owner, an asset manager, but you really don't for these.
Yeah, I guess we did think bigger picture, and that these are county assets and not assets of a particular asset manager. So they're the assets of the public. These assets have a public good. They provide a service to us, and so that's the overarching, I think. Kirby, you want to expand on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's something that we also grappled with, like how do we, but the idea behind it is that we wanna manage them as a public resource for, you know, under the public trust for everybody, because like Jim kind of alluded to, these provide ecosystem services and are kind of integral to quality of life for Kitsap County communities. And so, yes, we may not have direct management oversight on many of these things, but there are, you know, those partnerships that we talk about, a lot of groups and organizations and programs and projects that we initiate and support and conduct across the county are implementing natural resource asset management through their work. And so, yeah, it's a different kind of idea around asset management.
And I think it helps that we have specific goals and policies in our comp plan to give us some direction and support.
Last 30 seconds, Don.
Make it quick. You said that there's no specific budgeting for asset improvement right now, which makes sense to me, but there's tons of grants out there that are aligned with improving these kinds of assets. Have you tried incorporating the idea of like your level of service planning into your grant applications, and has it seemed to like improve your chances or anything like that?
I think that's our next step. Yeah.
Good idea. We'll start doing that.
So
haven't quite gotten there yet, but that's the plan. Well, thank you, everyone. Looks like we're heading back to the main room. We'll see you there.
Thanks, everybody.
Do you live over near Port Gamble? Are you able to live on the Kitsap, or do you come from somewhere else?
Yeah, I actually live in Hansville, so I'm very close by.
Have we had this discussion before? I grew up on the Kitsap, so I love
really?
Hansville.
Oh,
it's like my
okay.
life's dream to live out there.
Oh, I know.
Well, or maybe in Suquamish. I love Old Town Suquamish too.
Both of those are very beautiful, and
yeah,
I had never been to that area, and just happened to find a cabin to rent when I was moving up to work for the tribe.
That's wonderful. Yeah, it's of course different from the late 80s when I was there going to high school, but still so beautiful.
Yeah, it's very beautiful.
Yeah, it's fun. How long have you been there?
Just a year as of the 12th.
Oh, wow. Did you come from far away, or are you like from the Northwest?
Originally, I'm from the Pacific Northwest, but I've been living in Arizona for quite a long time. So I was coming from Flagstaff.
Oh, wow. That's a big change.
Yeah.
I've never been to Flagstaff, but people say the mountains are beautiful, and I can believe it.
Yeah. It's very different though. So, very, very different landscape, and yeah.
Yeah, that's fun. Well, I had an aunt that lived in Sedona for a while, so I visited her, but I think you're not quite there yet when you're in Sedona.
Yeah, only about a half hour, 45 minutes.
Yeah, it's very pretty.
Yeah.
Well,
it seems like it might just be us. I was looking at the breakout room charts, and yeah, everybody else, there are no other unassigned people. It is just us.
That's awesome,
So,
I guess.
all
I mean,
right.
we can ask Dana if we're allowed to go someplace else, but I think probably we have to stay here in case somebody decides to switch over to this group, maybe.
That would be my assumption. But yeah, maybe we could talk about partnerships overall, because I'm coming from the tribe's perspective, and I'm
I'd
still
love
kind
to
of getting
hear it.
caught up. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I feel like I'm still kind of getting to know beyond the surface level of how KNRAMP works with the tribe. I know Marla and Roma, who was not able to attend, have done a lot more collaborative work, but it sounds like it's been very helpful in elevating tribal concerns regarding treaty protected rights and resources to county level implementation. So that's phenomenal. And I would love to see just what are some ways to continue strengthening these partnerships, things that we can do to better collaborate, and if there's any, I don't know if you perceive any gaps or anything we can work towards.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you just observed. I think, years ago when we were first working to figure out, what are the services and what are the assets, and we landed on provisioning salmon and shellfish as sort of the services that like integrate all the other services, and that are in some ways measurable and obviously critical to treaty protected rights. And then the work that the core team has done to get KNRAMP emphasized in the comp plan, like you were just saying, and like Jim and Brittany said, and this was the dream for this program all along, is to take these natural assets and fold them into county planning using language that planners understand and know how to respond to, right? And that sort of puts the natural assets on the same playing field as all the other assets that county planners manage and outcomes that they manage too. So I think the trick now for Kitsap County will be how can we implement it, and how can we take the annual report on levels of services and really use that, and especially as it starts to change year over year, how can we use that? How can we use it, for example, to write sub-area code? I mean, if you've got areas that are really in very high levels of service and they're contiguous, like, should you be thinking about sub-area code that extra protects them? Like, I can't speak for the county, but that would be a question I would have, And then how can the tribe use the level of service information when you're commenting on county decision-making, or participating in consultation on county decision-making, and help to put those decisions in the context of how they're going to impact sub-watersheds or sub-areas or different levels of service for different attributes or assets. I think there's so much potential in how this gets implemented, even just with the baby information we have. And then as you get information over time and the information grows up a little bit, then to really see, well, are we achieving that environmental gain? Are we achieving no net loss? What is happening here? And to have a way to talk about that everyone agrees is not a perfect accounting way, but a way that we've all looked at and agreed to use. Like, to me, that feels like an amazing thing that we've never had before to be able to use to frame discussion. I mean, I don't know, have you been parts of any conversation, or has the tribe talked about how you might want to use this information or consume it going forward?
Yeah, I know that elevating those issues of fish passage barriers are just a very big part of what the tribe wants us to do. And so being able to make that connection has been huge. But one thing I would like to do is take this and go to either the policy meeting or to some of the other leadership in natural resources and say, here's what's going on now. Are there any things that we now want to elevate as well? Or are there ways that we could implement what's going on now in better partnerships and communication? So I'm still trying to see if there's any gaps there or anything that, does everybody on this team understand the information and have all of the access to this information? So I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything because I am so new with the department. And seeing like where I can fill in terms of coordination and providing avenues for collaboration.
Yeah, and I'm hopeful that as this first report on the state of the assets comes out, it will sort of, I mean, the idea is that it'll give everyone sort of the baseline or the foundation to the same set. Everyone will have the same set of information to start with. And so I think and Dana and Casey have been working on outlining this with the county and with the core team, and, Robinson and others have been working on producing the assessments, and I think we'll have a draft soonish. And I think it'll be really important for us to all look at it together with that lens that you just described. Like, okay, does this give us the information we want to have a conversation with parks, right? Or have a conversation with land development, or be able to put together a request to the county to create a zoning overlay or a new sub-area plan or whatever,
Yeah,
and then
that would be important.
and then over time, are there ways that we can, just like further cook some of this information into county decision making? So over time, would the county say, oh, we're just going to have a policy that we don't do any subplots. We don't increase density in areas that are providing very high levels of service or adjacent to them. I mean, I don't know what the right answer would be, right? But you could imagine using this information in a way that you sort of like get a little more predictable.
Yeah, and I know that those are all concerns that the tribe has. I mean, density, sprawl, increasing traffic, and then buffer reduction are definitely things that are matters of concern. Just making sure that we're not having those issues of runoff impacting fish-bearing streams or streams that may end up bearing fish or end up impacting that broader watershed. And I know that starts to become pretty complex because the watershed is broad and it functions so holistically in terms of its overall health. So sometimes the impacts can be farther away than immediate, but at least protecting areas that have high levels of service and connectivity would be very important so we can maintain the speech passages and the broader ecological health.
Right. I mean, when you think about, I guess part of what we're supposed to be thinking about in this group is like external partners. So beyond the tribe working with the county, do you do much work with like the conservation district or shore friendly, or are there others that might make sense to call in?
Yeah, we have, and actually we're part of a variety of different regional local processes. We have a lot of connection with local nonprofits as well as connection with local governments and state governments. So there's quite a lot there, and actually finding a way to tailor our involvement and make it more targeted and see that we are hitting specific action steps is something that I have on my list to do in order to make sure my involvement was maximized and that the team is able to best participate and raise up tribal concerns to the correct partners.
Right. Where a difference can really be made. Yeah. What did you think about, did you see Don Gorley's question in chat about a tool that people could use at the permit desk? Like, I always feel like that's the big opportunity to connect here. Like, how do we take some of these sort of longer range or higher level planning documents and then really connect them to the permit decisions? What did you think about that?
I didn't see the question, but I think that is important. I think especially because I'm not a planner. My background in terms of connecting to that was more from public lands and parks and rec. So I think having things that provide that connection and context can be really helpful because there's a lot there and it can be complicated to go through, and sometimes it's a different language, it's technical expertise, and that might just not be the case for every person reviewing the document.
Right. Yeah, I think that connection between the parcel scale permit decisions and the basin scale or sub-area scale plans is really one of the hardest ones, right? Because you can have a great plan, but if every permit decision is an exemption of some kind, right? Then what?
Yeah, and that's a concern, if something is exempted, are we aware of those exemptions? Does that impact pretty protected rights? And how is that holistically impacting the watershed? So a single exemption may have minimal impacts. But if that's setting a tone and now we have 15 exemptions on the same stream or within the same watershed, well, now we're seeing that might have a higher impact. That may actually mean something. And so,
Yeah, or like in the same headwater wetland, right? Like if you have a bunch of parcels in a headwater wetland and none of them are buildable, but all of them have a right to build, then what do you end up with?
And I think that's the concern. Like if it's looking in isolate, and it's like, oh, one area, we can make an exception for that. And then it turns into 30. And it's like, okay, we've all looked at them as though they're only one, but the actual impact is we have 30 exemptions. And so that would be, I think, a really important distinction. Like, are we looking at these things holistically, and are we able to, our permitting processes and exemptions considering that as well, that it's not just the impacts of this one building, but the impacts of all of them together.
Yeah.
And additions of things like additional traffic, and we have an ADU unit. There's some cost benefit analysis there because that can be helpful in terms of cost of living and providing some housing, but at the same time, it can also increase the number of cars that are in an area, increase the density, and it can effectively create density while skirting that those actual goals by just turning a single family home into suddenly there's an apartment on the property. So those are some interesting.
Yeah, plus there's always the septic issues in the counties with ADUs, right? Like, well, how many bedrooms did we design for? How does this even count?
Yeah. And septic's a big question. I mean, you can see in so many different studies the impact of wastewater and especially prescription drugs.
Oh, wow. On fish?
On fish and amphibians. And this is quite a few different areas have done studies, and they've found antibiotics, they've found antidepressants, and they've found birth control pills. And so those are all things that are really impacting overall ecosystem health. And I say this, I not really thought about overall, because we're not taking those pills and pouring them into something, but it's coming from bodies. So between that and other items that can be contaminating our water, that's always a question: how is wastewater being handled? Is there this pharmaceutical intrusion? I'm actually not sure in this area if that's been studied or looked at, or if people are on that, but I know it's something that's broadly been a concern throughout the country.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know very much about this. I think the wastewater treatment plants tend to measure those kinds of chemicals in their effluents, but I mean, the only way you understand what's coming out of septic treatment, right, is by measuring receiving water, like general receiving water quality. So water quality in streams and in the bays and embayments. And I don't know if they're looking for that.
I'm not sure. It's something I wanted to dig into when I had, if I ever have time, but to read through if there's any research going on, if they are testing in this area. I know a lot of the research I saw previously was done in the Midwest, and they looked in areas that had older wastewater treatments, and they also had older systems and septic systems of those issues of leakages. And I think some of it was also in Appalachia.
Oh,
So
wow.
I'm not aware entirely of the impacts here, but it'd be something that I'd be curious about, and particularly if we're adding additional stresses to septic systems and wastewater sprawl or ADUs. Are we also getting pharmaceutical contaminants that could have impact on spawning fish, and could have impact on amphibians that are part of that food web? And I think that's one piece that I'm very curious about, and that I think should be a question about those increased stresses on the ecosystem.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, Bruce, how are you? Oops, we can't hear you.
You're on mute, Bruce.
Hi.
Hi. We're just chatting.
Yeah, I noticed this group and thought it'd be very interesting to have the discussion about partnering for impact, and especially because our role as the Skokomish tribe is being an advocate for the resources in our UNA. So we do want to partner, and I'm kind of interested as a planner in how the cartograph works. I think the tribe is a very small entity, and we really don't have much in the way of a facilities management or asset management program. But I kind of wanted to know more about cartograph, but more so than that is looking for ways the tribe can partner with KNRAMP, especially again projects around the watershed, the Hood Canal watershed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, what's your sense of how to ask? Right, like it seems to me, or certainly what I've heard the folks in the county talk about is that, the KNRAMP program will just provide additional information and like a set of consistent information that partners can use together for programs that already exist. Like, could the Hood Canal Coordinating Council factor it into some of their decisions about what projects to put forward or where to put projects forward? Or I don't know. I wonder what you think about existing partnerships or new partnerships or.
Those are good questions. To be honest, we've just really started participating in KNRAMP. So I'm still kind of integrating an understanding of it. So the information sharing is definitely something we're very much interested in. Knowing how KNRAMP is evaluating the natural resources helps us also look for how that plays into our rights and our own cultural relationships. So one of the things we are looking to promote, in addition to everybody knows fishing rights is a big one for the tribe, but we also our tribal rights also include forest resources, cultural resources, and one of the conversations I've been trying to promote is what is biocultural restoration, which is kind of connecting natural resources with the cultural factor. And because KNRAMP looks at natural resources as an asset, that cultural factor is an important part. And I don't know exactly yet how that might factor into the valuing. But maybe it's worth looking at.
Yeah, that's I mean, that's really interesting to me. And do you feel like does the cultural connection or the cultural value, does that flow like mainly from the status of the quality of the resource or the access to the resource? I'm just trying to put together like, what are some other factors we could think about,
Yeah. Yeah. It is difficult to pin down because the tribe has its historical perspective on cultural resources. But one of the things I've observed is that a lot of the plants that the tribes used traditionally, many of them are actually, although they're not domesticated, they're not entirely wild in the sense that certain cultural resources were cultivated for sure. I was just over at Oak Patch, which is outside of Kitsap County, but still on the peninsula. But they were talking about how years ago that area was managed by cultural burn for camas bulbs for sure. But it really is a part of why Oak Patch is the unique ecology it is. And so that's, I guess, maybe an example of cultural aspect to the natural resource. And the question comes up for me is, if we're valuing native species just because they're native species, are we looking at the cultivation or management of those? Again, I don't really know how it fits into the KNRAMP protocol. And maybe it doesn't, or maybe it's something that might factor in the future if we can begin to see how that is relevant.
Yeah, that's really interesting to think about. Chloe, what do you think? Is that an issue that comes up for you at Port Campbell Slalom, or?
So it would be a yes and response, where yes, absolutely, that's a huge part of what we want to preserve. And a lot of that information is actually coming from our cultural department. So being neither I'm not a tribal member, and I'm also in the environmental program, it might be worth considering how we could bring in someone from the cultural department. I know that they've been very busy, but that might be a really good interface of these two issues, because while the fishing piece that we were talking about, that protection is absolutely cultural as well, being able to speak to how these areas are managed for traditional plants and for medicine. I think that that would be a part of considering this to be an asset, but I also don't want to share things that may not be something that the tribe wants to have shared, or at least in a certain way. So it might be appropriate for me to elevate that question to our department and extend an invitation to one of these workshops to have a further discussion.
Those are good points. To be honest, the conversation I've started has been with our cultural people, and maybe I'm too forthright to bring it up here. It was just something that has come to my mind, and it's a small group.
Yes,
So,
we promise to be careful with your information.
well, I think what I'd like to see happen, and I'm kind of more from speaking for myself, because this isn't like a statement of the tribe or anything in any way. In fact, just about anything I say should not be taken that way. But I think we've gotten into this default of, when we say cultural resources, we're talking about historical, archaeological, and the first person we're going to talk to is an archaeologist or an anthropologist. And yet, we're all about planting basket willow in the wetlands, because it's a wetland plant, it's a native plant. But a lot of those basket willows were groomed and were cultivated. They were cut. And yet we have these wetland laws where you can't touch the wetland plants. So, there's a lot there. That's part of the reason why I want to bring up the conversation, my tendency. And yeah, it's probably something that we need to hear from people who are voices from the cultural qualification. But that's kind of some of my thoughts on it.
I agree with you, Bruce. And I think that that's a really important piece that we can probably elevate through this further discussion, especially how we often are talking about native plants, and that we're taking it from this kind of environmental restoration side, but there is a holistic part of this that includes history and people and culture. So I think that you're correct in that observation.
Maybe at some future point, it might be something to consider as like opening a new dimension for the natural resource assets. I think especially of kind of like the community forests, and I believe there's a community forest up there that I imagine the Port Gamble is involved with. I don't know details, but I can only imagine, and it would seem strange to me if they weren't. But that probably would be one of the places where I think it would maybe be the most relevant. How that community forest can be utilized by the tribe as, you know, or utilized by everyone as you know, beyond just the forest products, but the non-timber products. And I think that's a conversation that I think at Kitsap County, the parks people are interested in that too. So it's
yeah, I worked on those community forest projects previously in my prior career, where we actually acquired community forest, and a big part of that is those application processes when you're working with the Forest Service on designating something as a community forest and getting those official designations. You have culture and education and conservation and economics, recreation. Like there's so many different pieces that get folded into that. So I think that would be a really, I know that we do have some participation within community forests here, and I think broader and more increased participation could be a very valuable tool in considering how those work within our goals.
It looks like we're being prompted to leave, so I'll say, Gary, welcome. I'm
Hi,
sorry.
bye.
And I guess I'm supposed to report out. I think I'll talk about this partnership with cultural resources, the idea.
And I think we have almost everyone back. Happy to see everyone back. So we have a few minutes to hear some takeaways from each breakout group, and we'll do a quick round robin with our team, maybe just 2 or 3 key points from each group, and then we'll open it up for any other takeaways from the full group. So we'll have some time for a discussion with everyone. So I'll go to Robinson first. Robinson, would you like to get us started for group 1 on the KNRAMP Foundation and data?
Yeah, thanks, Dana. Yeah, we had some really good conversation in our breakout room. We kind of talked a lot about the early stages of how we chose the different attributes and assets to look at, which I think makes a lot of sense for where people are coming to this space. It's a completely new way of looking at and managing natural resources. And so really just, you know, there are so many different attributes to measure how healthy an ecosystem is. And so we really talked about, you know, like all the early stages of the discussions that were had. It was kind of like throwing spaghetti on the wall with all the different data and attributes and finding the ones that made the most sense for the goals that this program wanted, which was salmon habitat protection and recovery and management of critical areas. And so we talked a lot about the different data sets as well, which ones that were available across the county and updated frequently. And then we also had some discussions about use later on of, you know, how this could be used as a prioritization tool, and some of the difficulties in how we broke out the management units and how those how the different partners are all going to have to work together. It's not all on public land. There's private ownership. There's public ownership. There's a lot of moving pieces. So it was a really good conversation. We're going to be sharing a lot of really helpful early stage workshop notes to kind of get people started. But yeah.
Thanks so much, Robinson. Mindy, I'll go to you next for group 2 on the early actions for launching KNRAMP.
Well, sounds good. And Marla, please chime in as well. We had some great conversations about just how do you get started with something like this, because it is so different. And one of the challenges that local governments face is breaking down silos of work within government, and just acknowledge that there's a lot of capacity constraints in a lot of organizations, but local governments for sure. And if your job is you're responsible for the transportation improvement plan, the TIP, for example, it's a lot of work to do that, and taking input early on in the process just gets really complicated, and not knowing, well, when exactly is the right time to weigh in within county government in that particular case to do that. But breaking down silos was pretty critical to the Kitsap project, and we had a couple of good examples of how Kitsap has been figuring out how to do that, and the fact that Kitsap County has noted asset management in its comprehensive plan is the way to make the change stick. So that was another question that came up is, you know, after this program is done or the grant is done, like, how do you keep going with something like this? And that's quite a big commitment. And Asset management, we talked too about, it can't be viewed as like extra work for everybody. Instead, it's a way to make government work more efficiently with the resources that you have. And you're also solving mutual programs within government. And in the case of Kitsap County, some good examples. Irene mentioned some of the work being done in parks, and there's a lot of work being done in stormwater. Making sure that that information is reflected in a common platform, in this case, Cartograph, means that you're taking credit for everybody's work, both within government and then outside of government as well. But I think in the end, we talked about it is hard to make such fundamental change, and letting people understand what you can gain for something like this might help bring this to more local governments to be to consider it. And frankly, Kitsap County and Suquamish Tribe, or Campbell-Squam Tribe, and Skokomish Tribe will have some really effective lessons learned. And we at Ross Strategic, we are meant to be resources for folks who are thinking about doing this in other jurisdictions as well. So for sure, tap us in. And Marla, anything you want to add to that wrap up?
You covered it all. I think the one thing that you said that was nice is that when you have this information, this data, it helps add context to how this project would improve your level of service, or helps add the details as to why. Because sometimes you just aren't interested in doing a project or working on it because you don't understand how it's going to help you in the long run or the short run. So adding context, I think, is what this can add to you too.
Thanks, Mindy. Thanks, Marla. Brittany, I'll go to you for group 3 on implementation.
Okay, yeah. So thank you to everyone in the implementation group for the great discussion. We kind of kicked off with some fish passage discussion as one way to implement this program is to help with fish passage prioritization. And we talked about it's a little bit different than traditional fish passage prioritization approaches that look more at like fish habitat and the species using the stream, and whereas with this, you can look at other components of the stream assets, such as water quality, riparian, and as well as fish passage to kind of ensure that you're getting fish up to some good habitat. We also talked about the fact that different jurisdictions have different individual needs, different fish might have different individual needs, and so this type of work might need to be tailored depending on what jurisdiction you're in, what data you have available to you, at what scale you need to be making your decisions, and kind of what your individual priorities and needs are. So this is very adaptive. And then we talked about a need to collaborate with cities and neighboring counties, and some opportunities there as we implement this work. And then we talked a little bit about regulatory and permitting implications, as well as a need for kind of a step-by-step protocol to start something like this up, and the potential for all our jurisdictions to learn from each other as we develop our own asset management programs, and kind of ask each other how we're doing things and continue to refine those as we implement. Yeah.
Thanks, Brittany. Kirby and Jim, I'll go to you for group 4 on the county planning.
Okay. Gonna have to shoot from the hip here because I forgot to take notes. They were so busy talking. But some of the bigger questions were about how do we get Public Works on board and using it, and how we tried to shoehorn this program into processes that already existed on their end. So that was a helpful conversation, and also having a lot of support in our comprehensive plan for this kind of program that gave us the tool that we needed to push this forward, and also speaking the same language as Public Works and our other program managers helped a lot. Even something as simple as using level of service as how to rank the condition of assets. And then we talked a little bit about managing an asset that we don't have an ownership of. So like we don't own it like we do the roads. We don't own forests. Individual property owners do, or other land trusts, or there are a lot of different private owners that do that. And so we talked a little bit about that. These assets being assets to the community at large. and also again having real good public support through our comprehensive plan policies and goals that helped a lot. Let's see. Some of the challenges with integrating natural resource management recovery into land use planning efforts. Again, just really strong planning policies woven into our comprehensive plan almost everywhere that we could fit it in. That helped a lot. Let's see. And again, we're only using this this is our first year, like we said. We're only using it as a tool that other program managers can use to help further their programs, but we're also hopeful that this could turn into a program of its own. And it was suggested that we look for other grants to help us advance it as its own program. I think that's a real good idea. We had talked about that before. And there's also a question about, could this be done at a regional level? And we did try from early on to make this program as much of a plug and play for another county or another jurisdiction as possible. So we are hopeful that it won't be too difficult once we get it set up and running and have a few years of testing it, that we could hand it off to another county or jurisdiction, and that they could pretty easily implement something like this without having to spend 8 years developing it. So I think that, Kirby, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just a couple of points too, Jim. That question about, the idea of managing assets is really about managing assets that you have like sole ownership over, like our public works, roads, manages roads. And I know that early on we had talked about the vision for natural resource asset management as, we really aim to treat these natural resources as assets under the public trust that are stewarded by the local government. And the idea is, we want to, there's a lot of great work happening all around us. There's a lot of partners, organizations, projects, and programs that do this very work, partnering with them, understanding that it really it takes more than just local government. It really takes the people, the community, and all of us together to really make a difference. We also, kind of that really good question from Don about what were kind of the biggest challenges when you were trying to implement this or integrate natural resource management and planning into kind of your land use long range planning work. And Jim, talked about, integrating this into the comp plan where we really can point to it and say, this is the directive over, all our county operations. But also, some of the challenges where we have a lot of really concrete, really strong land use policies that have been in place for a really long time. And they're kind of the norm. And so I remember there's examples of development agreements that were vested, 20 years ago that, were approved before we knew better, before we had better data, before we were really thinking about responsible development that really takes into consideration natural resource asset management. So those are some of the things I think at the kind of the planning shop, it's really hard to figure out how to balance those out at this point in time. So I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kirby, and thanks, Jim. Elizabeth, I'll go to you next for group 5 on partnerships. I know this was a small group, so definitely feel free to share any takeaways from the discussion.
It was a small but mighty group. I just want to take a moment to appreciate what Jim and Kirby said, because I feel like integration into the county decision processes and breaking down those silos in the county, it's at the very center, I think, of why so many of us who've been working on Puget Sound recovery for so long wanted to do anything we could to help this program be successful. And I will just say, with my editorial hat on, that the work that the county's done to integrate this so far has exceeded my wildest dreams. So I'm so excited as we move into this first year of implementation. So we had a small but mighty partnership group, and our partnership conversation, I think in part because of the folks who were in the group and the perspectives they brought, really ended up centering around tribal cultural resources and cultural uses of natural resources beyond provisioning of salmon and shellfish, and just sort of thinking about not just sort of historical tribal cultural issues, but like present day tribal cultures and the plants and places that they want to use in their practices, and how we could think about more partnership there. And I remembered that when we first started working on this project so long ago, you know, one of the things that we thought about when we identified the pilot watersheds with the help of Port Gamble, S'Klallam, and Suquamish were tribal cultural importance in the sub watersheds. And so we just talked about that partnership relationship with the tribes and how to continue deepening it. And then earlier in the conversation, we talked about something that Bindi and others brought up, which is just the value of a common currency, the value of a common framework, a common platform, a shared language around streams, forests, and shorelines, and how well they're doing and how we know. And the idea that it can put your decisions into a broader context, and it can connect them on a longer time horizon. So those are the things we talked about. Thanks, Dana. Oh, I should say, Chloe, would you like to add anything?
I mean, I think that you covered a lot of it, just what we're talking about, but thank you so much. And I know we had also kind of veered off into other discussions about questions of research that could go on within the area, but that might be beyond the craft of this particular discussion here.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks, Chloe. And thanks, everyone, for the report out. These are very rich conversations, and I appreciate that. And I heard also this idea about maybe the need of having a step-by-step protocol for launching a similar program and adopting it. And I like Jim's expression of like plug and play, so I appreciate that. Let's open it up to the full group now. This is definitely some time for us for an open conversation. And I think we heard some of those good highlights from the report out, but we would definitely want to hear from the rest of the participants in the room. So we'd like to hear from you if you have any additional takeaways or reflections from the conversations that you are part of. So anything that you would like to highlight. And also we're curious, what's one thing that stands out to you from the KNRAMP program, something that you learned today, something that you found useful, or maybe even something that you might apply in your own work. So we'd love to hear from you. Feel free to raise your hand if you want to chime in. You can also provide some written responses in the chat, but we're definitely encouraging people to chime in conversation.
Dana, I could offer a quick reflection on some of the things that I heard come out of the other breakout groups.
That sounds good. Yeah,
I had a couple thoughts based on what I'm hearing out of some of the other breakout groups. And I guess one theme that I keep coming back to as we've worked through this program development is, at its heart, this is really not only a strategic planning tool for the county, it is also really a culture and behavior change tool for our entire county and communities, and both internally and externally. And you know, although Kitsap County doesn't necessarily own all of the natural assets in the county, likewise, neither do, you know, the landowners own, you know, the waters and the shorelands, you know, often, and those are collective resources owned by the citizens and the tribes and, you know, our future generations as well, right? And so sort of shifting our community culture and behavior toward, you know, treating these natural resources not as possessions, right? And not as hurdles and barriers to be overcome with, you know, mitigation and permitting, but as resources and assets to be protected and cherished, is a behavior change that I think this program is helping us to kind of communicate. And it starts internally, like, it starts with us within the county being able to all get on the same page across departments that a stream is a county asset, just like a pipe is a county asset. And that what we do to protect a pipe asset should not be at the expense of the stream asset. And in fact, where we can proactively improve the stream asset or the shoreline asset, we have a responsibility as the local government to do so. And I think we see it working internally, and I think it's helping it's a great communication tool for us, for the public, as we kind of seek to shift the paradigm in our local planning processes as well as our community. So
thanks so much, Brittany. I appreciate that. Any other reflections from the current conversation, from the report outs, but also from the presentation and from the breakout group discussions?
I'd also like to commend some of the other local jurisdictions on this call who are doing similar work. I know we heard from Grant at Tumwater, and we are really looking forward to learning from some of you all. I saw Pierce County on here. Really excited to work with you all as you do similar work and help us make ours better as well.
Yeah, I think we heard some great input. So I think one other question that I have for people, it would be helpful to know what kind of information or resources you would find helpful for initiating a similar program, or even thinking about natural resource asset management internally. So I'm just wondering if people want to share from any experiences from their own work. Grant, go ahead.
Well, I'll speak up since Brittany called me out a little bit. So, yeah, for us as a jurisdiction, we're really interested in moving in this direction for a number of reasons. Obviously, I like the aspect of behavior change from a internal and external standpoint. I think that's something that's overlooked in many ways, but is a significant part of the work we do. The other aspect is when you're coming at it from a city or local municipality standpoint, in which you're dealing with an urban center that's heavily developed. I had mentioned in our group that wetlands provide a function that tends to have an opposite type of rating than, let's say, a forest or a stream system based on its functions. And so from a city, we're looking at natural assets from benefits to society. And I think that rating system needs to be weighted so that for first and foremost, wetlands are looked at by everybody, not just wetland biologists, as a valuable asset to a community. And so, from the city standpoint, that's kind of the stance that I'm trying to approach this with. The other aspect is that the NPDES permit is starting to look at assets, natural assets, as a component for reporting, and it hasn't been mandated. It's just been injected by the ecology staff that, hey, you really need to look at your natural assets and look at how stormwater functions are improved by having those intact. And I'm very grateful that they're pushing everybody in that direction. And so, it's different from a county perspective versus an urban perspective. And I think that's kind of the challenge we're having. How do we build the framework for that, and then start to get everybody on board? Because it's almost a flipped view on natural assets in some ways.
Graham, thanks so much for sharing those thoughts. I'm wondering if anyone else has any other reflections on what Grant just shared on the potential challenges and also the differences that we're seeing across different jurisdictions.
Yeah, I guess I would just add to that you know, we did look at weighting our assets differently, but we decided not to at this point. The program that we use to rank our assets does have that ability to weight certain criteria. So that we may go there in the future, but we haven't yet. And on the urban versus rural thing, we also wrestled with having different desired levels of service for urban versus rural. We still have not, you know, landed on, we haven't done it yet. But that's still something we're scratching our head on for the future. Should we go there? Should we not? So as this program develops, that'll be one of the questions we'll have to answer.
Well, if you want to use us as a test city, let us know. I would love to help with that.
All right, thanks.
And I'll just kick in because, oh, go ahead, Brittany. Oh, I'll just kick in too, since we work on stormwater as well, Grant. Robinson's colleague, Katie Burns, has been thinking about this a lot. Tree canopy, you might call it tree canopy. We also call it a stormwater best management practice. And it's basically it's green assets, and it can solve multiple problems on that. But yeah, the scale might be a little different to start thinking about that. And there's abundant conversations in our region right now about tree canopy, especially in urban areas with urban heat island issues, not to mention solving other stormwater issues as well. So a lot of overlap. And I do think, Brittany, you might want to kick into, or Sean O'Leary, if he's still here. That's why the stormwater programs and the projects are, you know, clearly ways of recovering forests and streams and shorelines to some extent as well. So it's another function that in this case, the county has, but can at least do it so that there's the common currency. And frankly, why forest cover was used, it's this, we looked at like percent impervious cover, but it turns out that's highly inversely related to percent forest cover. So we didn't need to include percent impervious cover because percent forest cover was a good indicator for that. So Brittany, sorry to jump.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just cut out for a sec. Yeah, and I was just throwing some ideas in the chat, but basically the gist of it is that this is highly, you know, customizable depending on, but it's really relying on what data sets you have or could realistically get. And the nice thing is if you're in a city, you have a smaller geographic area, so it might be easier to get certain data for a city that, like for us county, you know, on a larger county scale is really hard to obtain. You know, but I'm really interested to see what other people do with this and what kind of data sets they use, because we know we have other places we want to take this with Kitsap County too. And I'll say this, I said this in our breakout group. I would encourage folks to just start. Like ours isn't perfect. There's lots of discussion we've had about, oh, we could include this, or if only we had this data, or we'd like to include this asset in the future. But having something to work from is, you know, so much better than working from nothing. So I would encourage folks to just start, you know, with whatever data you have, and then you can always improve it over time. But yeah, highly customizable, and happy to work with anybody on collaboration.
Thanks so much, Brittany. And I think this was one of the main questions that we heard, like where do you start and how do you start with what data? So thanks for covering that. Any other reflections from the groups before we wrap up? Mark, go ahead.
I was just going to add to the previous comment from Brittany on, they discussed all sorts of things and started with what they had information on, and I was just going to provide that standard caution of don't let the perfect get in the way of good enough or getting started, etc. I've been in those discussions many times where you propose something and all you get is pushback because it's not perfect. It doesn't have this issue that's my favorite or whatever. And I just wanted to applaud her point and provide my support.
I appreciate that, Mark. Thank you. Okay. Thanks everyone for the great conversation. I think this was great, and I've seen a lot of engagement in the breakout groups as well. So we're just about at time. In a moment, I think I'll hand it over to Brittany just to help us wrap up, and she'll go over the key KNRAMP resources, and we'll share those with you after the workshop as well. Before we close, I would encourage everyone to maybe add in the chat or continue to add in the chat, what's one idea that you're taking away from today's discussion, and also if you're thinking about implementing specific ideas in your own work. We're definitely interested in learning more from what other jurisdictions are doing. So with that, I think, Casey, maybe we can share the slide with the KNRAMP resources, and Brittany, maybe you can quickly go over that, and we can also add them in the chat and then share them after the workshop.
Yeah, so as shown on the slide here, this KNRAMP Asset Narratives resource is a story map that includes our current maps. So if you'd like to zoom in on a specific asset, you can click on the management unit and it will show you like the score for each individual attribute and the overall asset score. So that's really cool to play around with. The second story map is kind of more of an overall general story map about the program. Feel free to share with other folks who might be interested as well. We've got our program webpage there, as well as Washington Conservation Action Education Fund's webpage. They've been instrumental throughout the process. We've had a lot of staff turnover around the county end throughout this process, but WCAEF and Ross Strategic have been there, as well as some of our tribal partners from the beginning, and have all of the background, so they can definitely help you along. And I'm happy to as well. Really looking forward to future collaboration with you all, learning from each other, kind of across the region as we all work to protect our natural assets. And then I'd like to thank our core team, the tribes, our WCAEF and Ross Strategic, our county staff, as well as our funders at the Strategic Initiative leads, especially currently the Habitat Strategic Initiative lead, Department of Fish and Wildlife, and Department of Natural Resources. And a huge thanks to them, as well as to the Department of Commerce for supporting this type of work throughout Puget Sound and Washington State.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Brittany. And I'm seeing some final comments in the chat as well, which is great. And thanks for your engagement today. If you have any follow-up questions or want to connect with us, feel free to reach out to us directly. We just added a list of contacts in the chat, but we will also follow up with you after the workshop. And as mentioned, we'll share the slides with everyone. So thank you for your engagement today and for the great conversation. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.